Hello, everyone, and welcome to another small screen Star Wars. As always, I'm Julian Mush. I'm joined by Rachel Wilkinson.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about Star Wars The Acolyte, Season 1, Episode 4, Day. Do you think next week's going to be called Night?
Maybe? This was a really weird name for an episode. I don't get it. I have no idea what it means, what it's about. I'm like, okay, I guess it happens during the day because she's like, we have this much daylight.
And then the sun sets right at the end.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. This plays into something we'll talk about later, which is I think that this is kind of like an incomplete episode of television, but
okay,
still largely good, in my opinion. We'll get into that. Anyway, yeah, this is called Day. This series is keeping us on the toes as far as naming or episode title conventions are.
Yeah, my theory was wrong.
With the duality of, the two named episodes at the top, then we get last week's episode, which was obviously Destiny.
Yeah.
Now Day. Maybe the new thing is D letter
Maybe
words.
I have no idea.
Maybe tomorrow will be Dawn or next week. I don't know. Anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Coming in at a solid 4.8 out of 10 on IMDb, which I think, considering how low the scoring we were talking about last week, is a big jump forward.
Yeah.
In terms of audience reception. Of course, the fan discourse continues. We'll talk a little bit about some of them this week, but largely we're just going to ignore it because
I don't think it's
we talked it to death last week.
Yeah.
Anyway, Day, The Acolyte, directed Alex Garcia Lopez, written by Claire Keekel, Cor Adana, and Leslie Headland. This has a much bigger cast, including some fun cameos this week that we'll talk about that are very fun. And again, causing an uproar, but I think unwarranted. And we'll talk about why that is also as we get into this in more depth. It's just so silly. The whole thing is dumb.
I can't take any uproars seriously at this point because I'm like, well, you're just being mad for the sake of being mad. So you're like, it doesn't matter what happens, you're going to be mad about it. So
my favorite meme that I have seen going around is when in Scooby-Doo when they like take the mask off and it's like, aha,
Yeah.
So there's one of those and it's like with the mask on, it's like bad writing and all these things that people, are saying that are like legit criticisms.
Right.
And then when they remove the mask, it's like sexism, racism, and all that stuff. It's so funny. And again, I know that that's not everybody and that's not the entire, the discourse around this. But as I said before, it's impossible to detangle the two, and that's intentional, and it makes it really hard to talk about that, which is why we're not gonna anymore. Yeah. We've said what we need to say on that front. All right, a little bit of housekeeping before we get into it. Follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast, Facebook.com/Tower Babblecast, and head over to our website, towerofbabble.ca, where you can find everything that we do. I am preparing to do a film club. We do a monthly film club on our Patreon, patreon.com/Tower Babblecast, if you weren't guessing, where for exclusive patrons only, we do kind of a random movie every month. I'm trying to decide like if there was a reason for how we pick them, but there really isn't. They are
not
random.
Really, no.
This month is going to be Conspiracy Theory, which is a Mel Gibson movie from the 90s.
Ooh.
Which you would think would be like, oh, well, that's why they must have picked that after Mad Max because Mel Gibson connection to Mad Max, but no. It's just because Jeremy happened to remember having watched that movie in the 90s. So yeah.
Nice.
Keep an eye out for that one. Everyone I've asked about it who's seen it says it's good, so I'm excited to see it.
It sounds familiar. I'm trying to think if I've seen that recently, but I don't know.
I personally have never seen it or had ever heard of it before.
Okay, fair enough.
Though I think it's directed by Richard Donner, which is kind of fun. So that's the best way to support the show. If you like the content that we're making, if you enjoy our Star Wars conversations, my recommendation would be to head over to patreon.com/Tower Babblecast. Drop $5 a month, get that bonus content, and help keep the lights on here at the TOB studio. Okay, let's get into the episode itself. Despite only coming in at 38 minutes, or so. I think maybe even less than that. Trying to see what the runtime is here, and I'm not seeing it. There's a lot here. It's quite dense. My
Mm-hmm.
general thoughts on this episode was that I think it was a big step forward in terms of quality. I think this is a much
Yes. Oh yeah.
better written, executed episode of television, and specifically of television, because there's some been criticisms going around for a while that Star Wars doesn't know how to do a TV show. I think
Right.
the only exception to that is, of
Andor.
course, Andor. Yes.
Yeah.
But that they don't know how to do a TV show. They only know how to tell long form movies, basically broken up into 6 or 8 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's pretty true, largely speaking. And I think when you having seen, for instance, House of the Dragon, which came back for season 2 this last Sunday,
Right.
the art of the individual episode of television within a larger season is undervalued, underappreciated, especially in the age of streaming. It is so important to be able to tell a cohesive, A to B to C, 3-part story structure arc within an individual episode of television,
Right.
while also being able to make it feel like a part of a larger whole. That's like the magic of it. When you execute that, you're doing it. You're killing it. Again, House of the Dragon, great example of that, which had a very crazy final moment, like cliffhanger moment at the end of this first episode, as similar to what we saw out of the Acolyte this week, but felt much more satisfying in its conclusion, despite knowing that there's still 9 more weeks of Game of Thrones.
Right.
We're halfway through this series, and my personal opinion on this episode is that it's not a complete episode of television, which I think is its biggest problem. Other than
Mm-hmm.
that, though, I think it's really, really strong. I think it's spent some time doing compelling character work. It's exploring character motivations, pairing characters together that I think we wanted to see more of and in more depth. I'm thinking of Osha and Yord. I'm thinking of Osha and Jecki. I'm thinking of Osha and Saul. It's a lot of that. But also even time with Vanessa Rowe and Saul, and all and of course May and Kymir. We get to spend actual time with these characters together, exploring what they care about and how they interact with each other.
Yeah.
That's like
Yeah.
core to television. This is what you get the luxury of doing in a television series that you don't have the luxury to do as much in a movie, which is to spend a bunch of time wasting time just chatting with people.
That's
right?
very true.
Where you have to move the plot along. So in television, you get the opportunity to do that, but I just feel like Star Wars has so often refused the call and just abandoned that whole philosophy and said, no, we're going to treat this all like a big movie. And then because of that, you get 8 hours of plot, and that's not that interesting.
Right. And you feel like when it gets chopped up into episodes, where there's some of those episodes that are a little lacking because of that too.
Well, yeah. And then we get really short episodes like this one, where I really strongly feel that with these live action drama stories in Star Wars, that they need to be at least 40 minutes to
I would agree
feel
with
satisfying. It is half an hour is a really solid format for comedy, for
Right, yeah.
animation, and for different reasons. Obviously, animation, it costs a lot per minute to manufacture, so half an hour seems very doable. Comedy, you want that tight pacing so that you can hit those beats, those comedy beats. 30
Mhm.
minutes, any more than that, and I still feel like you're stretching it, which is why I like dramedies, things like Ted Lasso, though it started as 30-minute, dramedy, could stretch itself into longer episodes because there were
Right.
moments of pathos in there too. So that is all to say that I really enjoyed this episode. It had me on the edge of my seat. Maybe that's a bit much. I was gripped to the television.
Yeah.
Compelled by what I was seeing. Excited to see what was around the next corner of this episode, and then immensely disappointed by the way that they chose to leave it on this kind of like I wouldn't even say it's a cliffhanger. It's not really, because it's the middle of an action sequence. So, and I guess that's technically what a cliffhanger is.
Yeah, I was like, to me, that's kind of a cliffhanger. Like, it feels like it's like a mid-season cliffhanger, right? Like, we've been kind of hyping up this big bad guy for a couple episodes at least, and all of a sudden it's like, well, here he is, and he's super fucking strong. Wait till next week to see if our heroes can, fight the bad guy or not.
It's so weird. Personally, again, not to beat a dead horse here or anything, but in my opinion, the best way, and I don't want to write the show. That's why I feel like I'm stepping into my own trap here, but to not conclude this confrontation, at least on a kind of like an action level, right? Feels like you've done all the setup work and then are avoiding doing the payoff until later. And that works in a movie. If this was a movie, this would have concluded and we'd all got this all together. It would have happened and would have felt satisfying. But now it feels unsatisfying because it's all build up and no payoff. And again, that can work, but I think it could have worked if, for instance, we cut away before anyone even saw the dark hooded figure, or as they're calling it, Darth Teeth.
Darth Teeth.
Yeah, the internet's calling him.
So you're saying you're not a fan of a middle of the season cliffhanger.
No. I am fine with it.
Oh,
I'm fine with it as a concept. I just don't think this was executed well.
Got you. Okay.
Because it gives almost too much, and then leaves us on the kind of like, well, why would you even start this whole thing if you weren't going to finish it? And then I think if you had finished it on, oh shit, this guy's arrived, May's all terrified about it, right?
Right.
And, Osha hasn't turned around yet. Saul is sensing something. We get that horror sequence of him floating in from behind, which is a whole other thing, by the way, because how long have I been saying that Jedi should be able to fly? It makes no sense.
Yeah.
That they can float everything but themselves, right? So now I'm Jedi flight confirmed, I guess, is what I'm trying to say here.
Hovering, floating, something like that.
Exactly. Ominous floating confirmed.
Yes.
But I guess like what I'm saying is to start the fight and then cut away mid-fight feels cheaper than cutting away before the fight even starts.
Oh,
I feel like it's maybe splitting hairs, but that's just the way I felt about it.
And that's fair. You're allowed to feel.
I felt, I don't know. It just feels like the previous seasons of Star Wars live action have been, generally speaking, around 6 episodes long. This is 8. When this type of thing happens, it just makes you feel like, okay, well, we got a short episode that didn't have a satisfying conclusion. Makes you feel like they split a larger episode into 2 that could have just been 1 episode.
It does feel like they split a larger episode for sure. Yeah. But no, I see what you're saying. And I mean, for me, I'm going to kind of have to I'll have a different maybe opinion about it next week. Like once I kind of see why they felt the need to do that, or if we can kind of figure out why they felt the need to do that. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of times when I do say that, we get to the next episode and it's like, there was no reason to do it that way.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
Well, I guess on that note, what was your overall thoughts on this episode?
This one was harder for me to watch. I'm gonna just like not because of the episode, just because of my life. I told you I keep forgetting that the episodes come out on Tuesdays. I keep thinking I'm on the Wednesday schedule. So I had to kind of watch it when I got home from work today, and it's like daylight and my kids running around. So it was a little harder for me to actually just get to like sit down and focus and watch it like I like to in the dark. But
right.
But no, I mean, I don't think I'm as mad about the cliffhanger part as you are. I definitely was liking like the look of everything, because I feel like they're on like an actual like on location. They're not on a set for a lot of the shots. And like 100%. Those shots look so good and like gave me like very like Lord of the Rings vibes
Oh yeah, totally,
sometimes,
100%.
which I really liked because I was like, oh, this looks like a kind actual like big open space. I love that. Like I love being on location, not like in a cramped kind of set. So it felt very like open. And yeah, there's just a lot of like neat what was I gonna say? Like callbacks to some of the original trilogy, which I like, and
Sure.
even like the prequels, obviously. But yeah, overall, I kind of see what you mean. That how this episode it just feels like not that nothing happens. Like there's lots of great character development, like you said, but I don't know. I wanted to like see a little bit more, kind of exactly like how you said. It's just kind of like I just felt like it wasn't satisfying. We don't really get to see what happens to Kanaka, right? Is that his name? The
Yeah.
Wookiee, which is kind of a
Kalnaka.
bummer. Yeah, Kalnaka. And I'm like, well, yeah, I feel like it's, I guess we maybe we'll see it next week, but that just kind of makes this episode fall a little, yeah, it leaves you wanting a little bit, I would say, but I'm not mad at it.
Well, they, in the entertainment world, they say, always leave them wanting more, right? And I think that's
Right.
fairly accurate, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean leave them wanting you to
The
finish your
rest,
thought.
yeah, the rest of the
Yeah,
episode, yeah.
yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, obviously, just visually, I really, really enjoyed this episode, I'd say. And like, I like the look of, what are they calling him? Darth T?
Darth Teeth.
I
Yeah,
like his look. I like his look a lot.
I
I
don't
don't know.
really like his helmet. I'm gonna be
No?
honest. I think it looks a little silly.
It gives me like alien, like,
Yes, the
predator
xenomorph.
alien, yeah, vibes,
Hmm.
which I think is cool and spooky. I just feel like Sith sometimes don't have enough fun with their helmets and like don't go as spooky as they should. And I like a
Oh,
spooky Sith.
you
I
should
like
really
it.
you should really lean into the fact that you're supposed to be like, hey, if you're the baddie, you should really lean into that.
You should look more spooky because I still
Yeah.
really like the that one Inquisitor that has like the he has almost like the bird mask.
Oh, the bird mask.
Is like
Yeah,
I think he's really like cool looking. Because it's just a little different. It's
certainly
almost like
different.
it's like the
Right.
plague doctor kind of feel, right? So
Hmm.
I don't know. I just like when things are a little more kind of horror esque when it comes to the Sith, and they're a little more creepy looking. So
Yeah, I guess I guess so. But I mean, for me, the like what's striking about the Sith, like the shape and look of the combination of, you know, Nazi helmet and samurai
yeah,
helmet and mask that Vader's got going, and then even Kylo Ren's mask is kind of cool, even though he's
yeah, yeah,
technically
yeah.
not a Sith. Um, and then we see stuff from the legends like Darth Bane and some of the stuff that we haven't really been canonized in the way that I think we'd get a good solid look of this is the way this character looks. But we've
Right.
seen examples of other helmets. Typically, it's just something that covers their mouth so that they can sound and look like Darth Vader,
Yeah,
which
pretty
feels a
much.
bit like, yeah, like a little bit. You need a little bit more creativity. This is definitely different than that. Um, to me, it looks like someone painted a black space helmet with scary looking teeth,
Like you think it's
and
too gimmicky?
well, it feels like too homemade. I feel
Okay.
like
Okay.
I would like something to feel a little bit more. Uh,
Too
uh, uh,
homemade.
yeah, I don't know. This looks like arts and crafts to me.
I just
And I
like
want
I
something
got a
that
picture of this Sith guy sitting there with arts and crafts, like making his
that's
helmet.
exactly, and that's what makes me think. I don't want to think that. I want to think that this is like a cool design that they had like they were working with a design
Ancient.
team on, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That then it's gone through all of the requisite tests to see if it's going to be received well by the audiences and all that kind of
Right.
stuff.
Right.
It's certainly when you think of, again, Star Wars helmets, what are really cool Star Wars helmets? The Mandalorian helmets, obviously, the
Mhm.
clones, Stormtroopers, the Vader. This is so wildly different
Right.
that
Yeah.
I respect that it's different, but I don't love it, is my kind
Fair
of
enough.
sense of that.
I do hope
And
that it's just kind of well, I mean, we'll get to it, but it's not like it's a plot point, but I do hope it's not that goofy guy like that is under
oh
that
no, I
mask.
think it almost certainly is at this point. There's
Right?
been a lot of that speculation going around, and then watching this episode, then rewatching it, it's
I
like, oh no,
know.
100% it's him.
I feel like
no
it
other.
is because you don't like see. I don't know. I feel like because he's like acting too goofy for it to not
Yeah,
be
it's
him.
100%.
I
Everything he
know.
says in this episode is like so on the nose.
Oh yeah.
Once you have that theory in your head,
I know.
But
I just think it's him, and I'm like, ugh, it's. I don't know. I'm hoping for another reveal, but we'll see.
I think with only half the season left. I think there's still time, or sorry, I shouldn't say only. With still half the season left, I think
Yeah.
there's time for another twist or another
Yeah.
reveal.
Yeah.
There's some
Definitely.
really wacky theories out there. I'm not really necessarily going to get into them. One of them is that May and Osha are actually the same person,
I saw that,
um,
and I think that's a bit too much.
and that they're like force projecting themselves. And I just
Yeah.
that doesn't. I don't. I think it requires too much um like jumping through hoops and contorting your
Yeah.
perception of what you're seeing on the show to make
Yeah.
it work for that to be it would be certainly a crazy twist. But I
And
just
like,
don't
how
think
can you
yeah.
force project yourself without knowing it into a whole other
Yeah.
personality? Because for me, it's like when Luke did it, he's like fully concentrated on doing
Oh yeah,
it, and it like
it
takes a lot of
ultimately
effort.
kills him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm like, for me to just be like, for someone to be able to like do it without knowing is like kind of insane. But
Yeah, I think that the twist that May is just like, you know what? Actually, I quit.
yeah,
Was surprising, and I
yeah,
was not
right?
ready for. I wasn't expecting that, and
No,
so
me neither.
that one is an interesting one, a fun kind of flip of what I think certainly expected out of that.
Hmm.
And then yeah, the Chimere being the Sith Lord or whatever it turns out to be is I think uh too well set up to be anything else.
I know.
And
Yeah,
and so won't necessarily feel that surprising. I think it comes down to execution
right.
ultimately. How do they do the reveal? We'll see. But I think that one's basically set in stone. All right, so let's get into the scene by scene breakdown. Unless you have any other
No,
more
no, no.
overall thoughts you want to say. Okay. So, for the record, I do agree with you on the shooting on location being such a big part of why I think this episode works
Yeah,
in a way that so many of the previous episodes we've talked about it on our last several weeks just didn't have a sense of place and or had a poor sense of place. And this does such a better job of showing you that they are in a real location that
yes,
feels otherworldly at times. I think you're right about the Lord of the Rings reference there. There's certain shots, these like big, almost helicopter shots, although they're just drones now.
right.
They were helicopter shots in Lord of the Rings. That big sweeping vistas of mountains and paths and mountain pathways and all that kind of stuff that feels real and
Yeah,
tangible.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. I want
and
more of that.
and it makes when you think of like Tatooine and episode 1, those and certainly episode 4, those were shot in Tunisia, I think, if I'm not mistaken. That's a real desert.
Oh,
You can
okay. Yeah, yeah.
feel that they're on a real desert. You can feel that they're on a real mountain and that they're in a real forest in this episode. And I think that's massively important. So totally agree with you on that. So let's start on Kofar. And by the way, this was pointed out by Screen Crush, and I think no, we mentioned it right in week 1 that they were doing the subtitles to identify, or the title cards to identify where you were, which planet you were on.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and that was something that was introduced for the first time. It's only really ever been used before in Rogue
In
One.
Rogue One, yeah, yeah.
Same font, which is a nice connection. That
Oh,
that I didn't know. The font thing
well,
I
there we go.
didn't clock. So thank you to friend of the show Ryan Airy on that one. All right, so we start on Kofar. A beautiful establishing shot. Again, this is a great example of the shooting on location here. We're establishing that this is a foresty, mountainy world. Honestly, very similar to Kashyyyk in everything we've seen of it, but that makes sense because there's a Wookiee hiding here, and
Of
they might want
course,
to see
yeah.
somewhere that might feel familiar to them.
That makes sense to me, yeah. Like, he's not gonna go
Yes.
hang out on a desert with all that fur.
No, that would be crazy. Although, camels have a lot of fur, and they live on a desert, so
That's true.
their deserts are cold at night. That's what people tell me. Anyway, we catch up with Kelnaka. He's in his Jedi robe, which is nice to see. And he's heading into his ship, which is wedged between two trees. It's obviously been there for at least 10 years or whatever it's been. He's self-exiled himself here
Mhm.
and is living off the land. What's most interesting though is we get a hint as to why he's self-exiled himself. We see shots of markings all over the wall,
Right.
drawings almost of like a crazy person, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think of like Beautiful Mind or something. And they are drawings that match or are very similar to the one on May's forehead, which is that kind of yin yang
Yeah.
symbol, right?
Yeah.
The swirl, the twist with the kind of the yin yang thing in the middle. Obviously representing dark and light and twins and that concept. But there's this seems to be the sense that Kalnaka has been like meditating or researching this. I'm not sure how you do a lot of research on something when you're like trapped on a forest planet somewhere,
Right.
but maybe through meditation, is like exploring this symbol and what it means. And so obviously he's obsessed with this situation that happened way
Absolutely.
back
Yeah.
on, May and 16 years ago, with May and Osha's kind of origin story, right? We just don't know why,
Right.
right? And so this comes back to there's still so much we don't know about the mystery of this. There's a line that happens later in this episode where Saul says, when we leave this planet, I'm going to tell you everything that you need to know.
Right.
Everything you need. I'm an open book, right? Which is
Mhm.
classic, le- fateful last words
Right. I
for
know.
for a character that's certainly going to die. I'm not ready to think that Saul's going to die, but I think it's very possible. That's almost exactly what Ned Stark says to Jon before he rides
Right.
off
I know. It's like
and then dies. Yeah,
it's such the classic thing. Like, I'll explain it to you one day or explain it to you soon, and then of course
right.
they never get the chance to.
They
Yeah.
never get the chance. Yeah. But again, and same with Kalnaka here, we don't get a chance to understand why he's looking into this symbol, and why it's important, and ultimately means we don't know why it's important, but it does give us a hint that it is more important than just okay. So May got that on her forehead when they did the Ascension ceremony. It means something. We weren't sure what it meant. We just now have a better sense of, okay, it's certainly important. It has a larger role to play in this story still.
Yeah, I would assume like
Any,
as a Jedi, he can, because to me that symbol has something to do with the Force, at least in some way, right? Or
sure.
some version of the
Yeah.
Force. So I would bet that he can kind of like meditate on it and um like reach out to the Force in his own way and try to like, connect with that, right? So I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's what he's doing. And you're right. He seems like he's obsessed with it because of what has happened. And there's like guilt around that. And, you know, something's drawing him to that symbol too. So I don't know. It would be nice to get a little bit more info on what he kind of figured out but I guess we'll see another flashback is what I'm
Well,
assuming.
if it's possible that whatever Kalnaka has researched or learned, he has saved somewhere in his ship.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah, that's very true.
And they might be able to be like, okay, another clue. Or it's possible that the Sith Lord, or again the dark figure, I don't know, what do we want? Darth Teeth destroyed that information or something after having killed him. So there's just still a lot of questions ultimately about where
Right.
this whole mystery is going. We don't know yet. Okay, so back at Coruscant, we're at the Jedi Temple. We do a fun circle wipe here, by the way, from the
I
circular
liked that.
symbol. And we do the circle wipe to Coruscant, which is I always like the the PowerPoint presentation transitions
Me
in
too.
Star Wars. Yeah. So at Coruscant, the Padawans are practicing, or some of the Padawans are practicing with Boken, which are wooden practice swords. This is something we saw introduced as a concept in Ahsoka, which is not that
Yeah.
long ago, when she was practicing with Sabine. Of course, the term Boken was also coined in another way in that series, but this is just the pure standard definition, which is a wooden practice sword, which comes from which is a Japanese word.
Right.
Anyway, they're being taught by a new Jedi I think we haven't met before, Master Lakshay, or Lakshay. I'm not sure how you say it. A ginger beard was
Love a
as
good
they were
ginger
referred
beard.
to. Yeah. Anyway, they're practicing swordplay, obviously, right? Jeki is front and center among the students. Obviously, is the only one that we really know here. One of the lines that stands out to me here in terms of kind of some of the advice that's being offered by Master Lakshay is to maximize your defenses without the need to strike.
Mm-hmm.
makes me think of, Yoda's teachings to Luke about, you know, always for knowledge and defense, never for attack, right?
Right, right.
That classic Yodaism. Um, I think we get a lot of through lines to some of these Jediisms throughout this episode. This is a good one, not the best one, but again, speaks to the Jedi's philosophy on the use of their lightsabers at all, which is purely for defense, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, stop thinking about how you're going to transition from this position into a strike and think about how you can maximize your defensive position should be your most important asset here. And we see that in play when we see, some of the action sequences with Jedi we get in the first two episodes where they're
Right.
really not attacking May, right?
No.
They're really just redirecting her and defending themselves.
Right. Yeah. Isn't that always, I mean, not necessarily completely, but isn't that kind of Obi-Wan's style too, a little bit? Like, wasn't
Mm-hmm.
his, fighting style or whatever Jedi style? I can't remember what you call it.
It's like style
Zorosu?
3. I'm very bad at knowing
It's like
or remembering.
Soresu, or I can't remember how you pronounce it, but
But it's
um,
it's the
his is
well,
more defensive, whereas like Anakin is a lot more like attacking, right? So like when you
yes.
watch them as like a duo when they're fighting somebody, like Obi-Wan's a little bit always more like on the defensive, whereas like Anakin's on the attack, a little bit more
Yes.
aggressive. So yeah, I always like to see these different styles, and it does seem at this time frame that they're very much more teaching defense than teaching attack because it's not a
Right.
war.
Yeah, and nor has there been a war for a long time.
Exactly.
Um, my thinking on this whole thing is that it's interesting that we have these different fighting styles to begin with when the core teachings of the Jedi is defense, defense, defense.
Right,
You'd
right.
think that their core teachings would be these are the defensive positions, these are what you need to know, right?
Mhm.
But, maybe they're just fascinated by the combat prospects, like what is possible from a lightsaber combat that's been taught over time. Because you can only defend yourself to success for so long,
Well, exactly. Like
Yeah.
at some point you have to like fight back,
You have to strike
right?
back. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah. Um, I would love a show that really just explored the different styles. It was just like maybe like a Jedi Temple series where we just follow some
yeah, that'd
Padawans
be
as they
cool.
learn to like master the different Jedi styles. They find the ones that they like.
Mhm.
Maybe we get to go, venture with them to Ilum where they find their
That'd be
kyber
cool.
crystal and all that stuff. That would be cool.
Someone
Um,
should just make that a course at Disney. Like you can go and go there for like a
right.
week and learn.
Yeah, totally. And learn to be a Jedi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would take that course.
Yeah, I would. Same. You wake up early, you practice with Boken or whatever,
Yeah.
and then that's cool. 100%. You get to make your lightsaber at the end.
See? Exactly.
Do your trials. Yeah. So Osha is looking on, maybe a little bit jealous that she's not, still part of it. I think we get more hints at that later. She wants to say goodbye to Jackie. I guess they've kind of established a fast friendship. She feels that as though she's done what she needs to do, Osha, and doesn't need to stay. She's thankful to Jackie to helping her find out, and the Jedi in general, for helping her find her sister, find out that she's alive at all, right?
Mhm.
And that helping her, clear her name and that she's not a criminal, right? She says, May is Jedi's problem now, and I'm no Jedi. So, there's this kind of self-doubt that May carries throughout this entire episode.
Yeah.
It has a really interesting, I think, arc where she seems to gain more and more confidence. She says as much to Saul at one point. There's kind of like minor setbacks, like when she touches that weird bug thing, and then when she is, feeling like she's most ready to face her fears, the scariest thing that she wasn't expecting, literally tosses her aside.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really fast, like, how's she going to pick herself up or pick herself back up from that?
Right.
I mean, it's even interesting how Kymir says, oh, she seemed like she was in over her head and stuff like this, that she's just being overlooked as
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
more of a pawn or tool here, both by the Jedi and by
Absolutely.
by Chimere.
Yeah, like
So
they're 100% using her too. It's yeah.
yeah. So and I think OSHA's sentiment here is she doesn't want to be used. She's already afraid enough about, how this being brought back into this Jedi stuff is making her emotionally vulnerable.
Right.
And knowing her sister's alive, that's good news, but knowing that she's a murderer is scary. So, like there's just a lot, and she doesn't feel like she's equipped to handle it, and she'd rather just pass the buck and, hide off in obscurity again, which
yeah, makes total sense to me.
it does, but it's a reaction that's based on fear, right?
Of course, yeah.
We talked, what did Mother Anastasia say to OSHA last week? Don't let fear make this decision for you, right? You should make the decision. And, she is ultimately convinced by Soul to stay, but the reason she wanted to leave, she was afraid to confront Soul because she probably thought she knew that he could convince her to stay. And B, that this all feels too big for her to deal with. She feels like they're all looking at her to solve it, and she doesn't have the answers.
Well, I feel like it's just like this is all so much, right? Like she went from thinking she didn't have a sister anymore to, okay, I do, and she's alive and she's a murderer, and now the Jedi are here and I'm back. Like there's got to be so many emotions like she's feeling that she's also not supposed to feel from a Jedi's point of view, right? So it's like it's absolutely a lot for her character to like deal with, especially probably being back in the temple too on top of all that.
Do you feel like the Jedi look at emotions like the Vulcans do, where like they suppress their emotions? Or is it more like therapy where it's like feel the emotions but don't let the emotions control you?
I would definitely say it's more so that like not letting them control you, not letting your decisions be based on them, like exactly, like not letting them define who you are, kind of thing, right?
Be aware of them,
meditate them away,
right? Have them in your head. Well, no, because that's the Vulcan method, which is
meditating them away.
To suppress emotion entirely, right? Logic over emotion, right? Not to like confuse franchises, but I mean, there's a lot of similarities here. And the sentiment from the Jedi seems to be understand your emotions,
right? Yeah,
understand where they cause you weaknesses, and be smart enough and in control enough to not let them control you.
Exactly.
Which I think to be honest, I think it's something that everyone should try to master. It's hard to do.
I would say so.
But again, obviously, it's less the emotional stuff that the Jedi are. Probably it's the fear of attachment thing.
Right. It's the attachment and connections. And
yeah. Because those things are important, right? And also help you execute on that original vision of understanding and not letting your emotions control you. You need support to do that.
Of course.
So OSHA, she's talking with Jecki. I love how Jecki, she's so perceptive, just like how we saw in the first episode when she's talking to Soul. So like, what's the deal with you and your old Padawan? It seems like you guys maybe have a connection, right? She's very in tune with other people. It's really cool. By the way, just as an aside, the actress who plays Jecki is Daphne Keane. She's the one who played the young Wolverine girl in Logan.
Really? Huh.
Yes. And I just feel like she's so good in this series. The characterization of Jecki, though with limited screen time, I think is pretty thorough. And
yeah, I would say so.
I think her performance is very strong. And I just, here's another great example of it. She says, "You mourn the years you lost between the two of you," talking about her and May, right? Recognizing that May's kind of importance to her has always been important. And OSHA knows that, May needs to be stopped, but understands that, she's too much of a weakness for her to do it, for her to be in charge of being the one to bring her in. He's like, and you recognize that May is my weakness. I recognize that May is my weakness. And because of that, I'm going to choose to bow out of this. I'm too close to it. Right?
Definitely the smart thing. Smart move. But.
Yeah. But Saul's argument later is that you can't deny your family. Right. But
which is a weird thing for a Jedi to say.
You know what? It's true. That's a really great point. For any character to say that, a Jedi to say that, it seems out of character. But I mean, not necessarily for Soul. Soul always has felt so far in this series felt the most
human,
emotionally mature.
Yeah.
Sorry, what did you say?
Human.
Yeah, human. Yeah. Less robotic. Which again, that comes back to the like our Jedi Vulcans thing again.
Yeah.
Okay, so May vows to meet up with Jecki next time she's on Coruscant. She said, we'll go to a cantina. We'll trade stories about Soul. There's this little cute smile. There's this moment where Osha says, oh, are you going to miss me? And then Jecki like blushes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's is that like a romantic thing, or do you think it's a friendship thing?
I think it's more of a friendship thing. I don't, Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's just more
you
of
just gotta be, everyone's on lookout for lesbians, so we gotta be on the lookout.
Right. I think it's more of kind of a on May's side of thing, like, oh, gotcha, like you're getting attached to me.
Oh, you have an attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think it's more like that kind of thing than anything. But
yeah, good call. If she was a lesbian, that's cool too, though. Just for
yeah, that's totally fine. I'm down with it. Yeah, I'd ship them.
Although, again, you'd have to shame Jecki for having personal attachments then, ultimately.
Well, yes, yeah.
Which is not allowed. All right. Anyway, she admits to not wanting to say goodbye to Saul before she leaves. She's trying to Irish goodbye Saul. What do you make of Osha going to say goodbye to Jecki, but not wanting to say goodbye to Saul? What do you think the reason?
I think she knows it's going to be harder to say goodbye to Saul because she's just. I don't know. I feel like they have more of a connection, and their relationship, I think, is a little bit more complicated as former master and Padawan.
Right.
And I also think that she kind of knows that he's going to try to convince her to stay and to help, and that it's going to be hard for her to say no to him.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's accurate. She says, I've caused him too much trouble, which is the classic line that people say when they don't want to say goodbye to somebody. So we go back to Kofar. We go a lot of back and forth between Kofar and Coruscant in this episode. May and Kymir land in a clearing and start packing their bags before they venture off into the forest. Again, this is clearly a real place. And we get a shot of the ship, which is pretty cool looking. We don't get a good shot of it once it's landed because it's kind of slightly out of frame, which I think is intentional, but also helps establish that, makes it feel a little bit more of a real world, lived in shot.
Do we know where this was shot?
I don't know. I don't even want to venture a guess because it could be literally anywhere. My guess is somewhere in Asia, but I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know.
We also get to get another kind of big establishing shot of Kofar as this forest planet, and it does look beautiful, very green. There's something about all forest planets being green in Star Wars. We get the shot of the Bunta tree being yellow. I wouldn't mind more planets in Star Wars. You know what I think of? I think of that planet where, in Order 66,
Felucia,
Felucia, which is
where everything's neon and glow.
Everything's neon and purple.
Cool. Yeah, right. I want more planets like that.
Yeah, so exactly. Cool. This is just another Earth-like planet, kind of.
Yeah, it's true. It's different areas of Earth for sure. We got the red tree planet in Ahsoka.
Yes, and that one was one of the coolest ones. What was that called? Cetos, right?
I know what you're saying.
A really cool name.
Give us something a little more alien.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, for a Wookiee hideaway, it makes sense because
exactly.
We already know that Kashyyyk is very similar. Although even Kashyyyk is more, alien with the trees being the size of skyscrapers.
So huge,
and giant bugs and that kind of stuff. And we get giant bugs here too.
Yeah, I was we get giant bugs here.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess they're maybe too similar. Maybe it's just too similar to Kashyyyk, and that's my problem.
I can see that.
Okay, so May looks to start her quest, but Kymir urges her to slow down because the planet is largely uncharted, so much so that bounty hunters refuse to go into the forest. And you have to wonder, how could he possibly know that?
Right. I know.
Right. And so these are more I don't know if I necessarily need to call out every single hint, but I probably will here just to really drive it home that this is clearly Darth Teeth here.
Right.
If it's not, I'll be even more. I think that'll be even bigger twist for me because it'll be a red herring that was well executed,
which I would appreciate, honestly. But yeah, there's just too many times where the way he says things, I'm ooh, there it is.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's at the same time, you have to, like, how much of an act is he putting on? How much of this is really what he's normally like when he's not trying to be extra batty,
Extra,
right?
yes, like serious, but
So like, there's a lot that like comes into it. Like when he says, "No, I care," to Osha, to May later in the episode, it does feel genuine,
yeah. Oh
right?
yeah.
And like, how do you square that circle with, you know, this super dark evil
Right.
Sith Lord or whatever? I feel like those two things are hard to hold in your hand together.
Yeah.
Um,
For me, I always keep thinking back to like how he spoke to Osha in the like the shop there
in the shop,
when
yeah,
he's
in
like
the
so close to her, and the way his voice kind of just changes where he's like, "Oh, you look
right. You look
just like her."
exactly
It's like,
her. Yeah.
ooh, like it gave me chills. I'm like, he's a bad guy. Like he's for sure a bad
Well,
guy.
yeah. I mean, we already knew he was a bad guy, but it's like how much of a bad guy,
hmm
right?
No, it's just like though, just the way, yeah, his voice changes sometimes. I'm like, you're suspicious.
Well, yes. And again, we're on to him, right? So
Sus, as the kids would say.
yeah. And like he's doing stuff here, like he's tripping over his bags and stuff, which feels like a little bit of a put on, right?
Right? Yeah.
Um, and anyway, he's talking about how he's been here before because he went to scout out where the Wookiee was, right?
Yeah. And like,
Um,
why is he doing that by himself? He seems like bumbling,
right.
right?
He says he's one Jedi who doesn't want to be found. May is skeptical. Why would Kymir put his life at risk to help her master, not his, right? He says he did it to help her, which is again another hint that he's doing it specifically because
Right.
he's the one that put her on the quest, right? And wants to give her every chance to succeed.
Exactly.
Um, then that's another thing which feels like, could this
Weird.
really be a true Sith
I know, because he's helping.
Lord? Because why is he helping so much? That doesn't seem
I
like
know.
something that Darth Sidious would ever do, certainly.
If he's
right?
not the big bad, then it's like there's something else going on with him. Like there's got to be
Yeah.
another reason.
There's also people saying, okay, so if we're going to assume that Kymir is Darth Teeth, then maybe there's another Sith Lord. Like he's
Right.
the apprentice,
Yeah.
right? Because how many times have we seen the Sith apprentice having their own acolytes?
Every
Right?
time.
Whether it's all the time, every single version.
Every
of it.
single time.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the only exception would be Darth Maul, but then even later he recruits his brother.
He recruits his brother.
right?
Yeah, it's like the natural. What's the word? Like way of the Sith is like you are an apprentice, and then you get a secret apprentice, and then you try to kill your master, and then your apprentice
Right.
eventually tries to kill you. Like,
yeah. But I mean, like by the time Maul does that, he's no longer an apprentice anymore.
no.
Yeah. But either way, I mean, I think the example is clear here, right? This is not new, so I would be open to that concept also. But again, it all depends on execution.
Agreed. Yeah.
So before they leave, Kymir chimes in with some more unsolicited advice, which is his favorite like thing to do, which would be like, "Oh, what your master really wanted was this." It's like, well, how would you know?
Right. Yeah.
He says, your sister being alive doesn't change anything. You need to kill the Wookiee. You made a deal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which again, it's just like you'd almost. Again, it'll depend on how this all plays out. But assuming he is Darth Teeth, I have to kind of, in retrospect, we'll have to come back and say this dialogue is bad because it's too weird.
Too weird.
Why would he be talking about it this way? If he truly is the Sith Lord or the Master, for lack of a better term here, then he shouldn't be talking about it like this. And if he's not, how would he know this information to be able to talk about it like this? So
Yeah.
I think it's fraught with problems.
He definitely knows too
to be
much.
honest. Yeah. May reminds him of how much sunlight is left. We get this 3-hour clock, basically, which doesn't really, like, usually when you get this kind of like timeline or this ticking clock, you kind of get to sense it a little bit more. We do, but not until much later in the episode. And I just, again, ultimately feel like it's maybe why the episode is called Day, but not necessarily great execution there. Anyway, they cross a bridge and then we cut to a title sequence. I felt like the bridge felt out of place. It didn't feel like they were in a place that would have a bridge. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I kind of felt, I get it too. It's like, what is it? Why is that there? Why are they crossing?
Why is there even a bridge here?
Yeah.
It seems like we're in the middle of literally nowhere, but there's this random bridge, which is funny. Makes you think of Selkirk and the Bridge to Nowhere.
Love that bridge.
Okay, so back to Coruscant. Unless you have any other thoughts on this brief
No.
Kopar scene. Okay. Back to Coruscant, a small Jedi council. And this one, okay, this scene is very dense, and it's full of all sorts of stuff, including our first big reveal or surprise cameo, I guess we'll call it.
Yeah.
That comes with its own set of people being mad online.
Why?
So a small, I'll get into it. Okay. A small Jedi council. This is not the High Council, but this is what this kind of like subcommittee that Genestra Rowe pulled together, right? That she was, chewing out Saul about. And so a small council meet to review the situation with May. They're watching a holo of her fight with Saul and making observations. This is also the first, as I mentioned, the first of two big cameos. The first one we get to see here is Kiari-Mundi, of course, the Jedi with the super tall forehead, if you're trying to place it.
Yes.
Which, you know what? I think this is brilliant. I'll get into this in a second. But this is the Jedi Master we know from the prequels, who had the line that everyone has been, hand-wringing over all season long, right? Ever since we found out the plot of the Acolyte, ever since episode 1, when this all started to play out, everyone's like, well, Kiari-Mundi said that Jedi have been, or the Sith have been extinct for millennia, right? Yeah. Kiari-Mundi himself said that. And ever since then, people have been going back and forth on that. But again, as we know in Star Wars, it's all a matter of your point of view.
Exactly.
So,
it's just his opinion.
Yeah, it's just like his opinion, man. So Kiari-Mundi, much younger here, his forehead not quite as tall. And
hair not quite as white.
But he does still have the beard, which is fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's what the online debate is going on over this, and I am just so sick of it. I'm so sick of this nitpicking that people are doing on this series. For one, I will say this: the story is not over yet. We can't start jumping to conclusions about what we think the show is doing or why it's ruining Star Wars based on partial knowledge. We don't know how they're going to tie the bow on Kiari-Mundi not being aware of the Sith despite being involved in this investigation.
Yeah.
However, I will say this. At this point in the episode, when Kiari-Mundi is involved in this investigation, there is no reason to believe, none of them have any reason to believe it's the Sith. And in fact, they all go out of their way to suspect other things. Splinter orders. Trained by a former Jedi. All this stuff, right? So for me, there's no lore breaking here, especially as it comes to that, his famous line from episode 1.
Yeah, of course not. Do people really think it's lore breaking? Like at this point, it's not
100%. But here's the other thing that people think is lore breaking. They think that because he's not supposed to be alive yet, according to Legends canon, and one Jedi card, whatever, kind of like a baseball card, but for Jedi. It had his birthday at 93 BBY, which of course would be about a couple decades later than where we are in this timeline.
Right.
However, as we must remind our listeners and viewers at all times, Legends stopped being, even at the time when it was quote unquote canon, was constantly being overwritten by movies and shows that Lucasfilm wanted to use and didn't feel beholden to Legends books, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Or comics. That was decanonized in 2012 when Disney bought Lucasfilm and became Legends, right? So there is no canonical birth date for Kiari-Mundi.
So
there's nothing to break
for
here.
a super long time too.
We don't know. I think there was maybe one lore reference that they actually lived a shorter amount of time, that they lived approximately 50 human years. But again, none of that is ever articulated in a film or television show or anything made since 2012 that would have solidified that into canon. And let's not forget, and I think this is where it really bugs me. Let's not be goldfish people. Recanonizing things or retconning things or changing things has been part of Star Wars since the very beginning. Now that's not to say that we want that to be happening all the time. It's certainly confusing when you change stuff all the time. I get that. But there has been, ever since Leia kissed Luke, has there been a retconning in Star Wars, right? They had no plan
Yep.
for Luke and Leia to be brother and sister at that time. And so they had to fix that in the next movie. So Ki-Adi-Mundi in Legends wasn't alive yet, but in canon hadn't been established. So this new canon piece of media, The Acolyte, is setting a new precedent. He was born sometime before whatever this 125 BBY or whatever we're at here.
Yeah.
Right? So lastly, my last point on this is this, and I'm going to look right in the camera. Nobody cared about Ki-Adi-Mundi. He was not a character that anyone gave a shit about. Don't pretend to care about Ki-Adi-Mundi now. You know, if you didn't love him at his tallest, foreheadiest, you don't deserve him at his most almost Padawaniest.
Exactly.
If that makes any sense. So I just think it's being used as a stalking horse, this argument that, here's another example of them
ruining
breaking
everything
canon and ruining everything, when really this is such a minor change that is actually more interesting. It's actually more interesting that they're going to have Ki-Adi-Mundi here because it forces the show to deal with directly that line and why he says that in episode 1. So they can't get around it now. They have to address it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So,
it's a good thing. Like it's just like
it's a good thing.
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
It's a good thing. We want to know why he said that, you know, and they're retconning it because they didn't think they would have to go back and do this right at the time.
Right.
But that's the whole point about the Sith being mysterious and the Sith being in hiding and them doing creepy ass shit for like hundreds of years or longer, right? So
right.
No, it just makes it more interesting. People need to chill the fuck out. It's ridiculous.
Yes, people need to chill the hell out, and this is a great example of like, give me a break. You don't actually care about this. So Jedi Master Holden, one of the other Jedi here, the woman, remarks that she is fast but weak. Her emotions guide her every choice in combat. Talking about Osha. Mundi notices that she still does have skill, right? Where Saul understands that someone, has trained her, even though she doesn't know who that is. I love how they're kind of like picking apart her technique. They're talking about her being driven by emotion, something we know that the Sith are,
right,
in their way of fighting, right? They are fueled by emotion, whereas the Jedi, again, similar to the Vulcans, are tamping that down and trying to be strategic and defensive, and thoughtful about their strategy in combat. The Sith, on the kind of opposite side of the coin, or May in this example, is pure emotion, just flowing through, all the peaks and valleys that come with, riding those emotional waves. So that's, I guess, when she says she's weak, I think was what she's referring to here, because it's like, well, she's clearly not that weak. She's killed 2 Jedi already.
Oh yeah,
right. That she's weak in her understanding of how to master the abilities that she has at her what is the word I'm looking for here? At her disposal. That's the one.
I've always thought, like, of the Jedi too, that they think that tapping into the dark side is like a weakness. Like you're not trying hard enough. Like you're taking the easy way out, right?
You're giving up. Yep.
Yeah.
Which, right, exactly. So you're cheating here, basically. So you're weak. You couldn't do it the right way, so you did it the easy.
You're not disciplined.
Yeah, exactly. So again, so Saul understands that someone has trained her. He says that she fears him, talking about her master. I love, by the way, this is a great line, a very Ki-Adi-Mundi line, because we know he becomes such a stick in the mud later. He says, "An apprentice that doesn't know her master, it's absurd."
Right.
Again, it just feels like a reflection of the Sith have been extinct for a millennia. It's impossible, right?
Yeah, right. Like he very much just seems like that type. Like he's just like, that's ridiculous. Like he just doesn't want to listen, right?
Well, it just, or is unwilling to like think outside the box.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It is easily kind of relies on the structure that he's been built into, and anything that challenges that feels like completely absurd, as he says here, right? Holden wonders if it could be a splinter order or worse, she says, and this causes an uproar amongst the assembled Jedi here. Splinter order, really cool idea. This is, something we've talked about a little bit around this idea of different sects. Obviously, we've just seen one already last week with this coven of witches. We've seen of course, the Night Sisters. But I think at this stage, I mean, I don't think when she says something worse, do you think she's referring to the Sith, or what do you think she's talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, because I think maybe they think about like a splinter group as like not necessarily like dark side. They just think it's like other Force users. But
Right.
something worse, I think, to them would be a splinter group that is dark side and is using, you know, they're bad guys, right? But it is so interesting to me that the Jedi kind of still have that arrogance at this time that they're like the only
Right.
ones. And it's like, yeah, like obviously, like when you think about it, there probably totally would be Force users on other
Well,
planets
across the entire
across
galaxy,
the
right?
galaxy, yeah, in
Exactly.
systems that they haven't reached yet, or areas that they haven't explored yet that
Right.
people who can use the Force. So it's obviously just not just them, right? So it's so
This
funny to
is
me.
this is the next line you hear kind of in the background. I think this even maybe is from Kiadi even. If there was a splinter order, we'd know.
Yeah,
Someone says, which sounds a lot like Mace Windu saying, I think if the Sith were back, we would
we
know.
would know. Yeah,
Right. And which is always like famous last words. But
yeah,
I just think this is a really great use of that kind of rhyming concept of like, here are themes in the Jedi that we recognize coming to play here.
yeah.
And that kind of
They've always been
that
like that.
arrogance. Yeah. Or at least have been like that for a long time.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, Mundi chimes in again saying that the girl could become a major threat. Again, this idea that like, okay, well, he's concerned that it could disrupt the Jedi Order. And so, of course, Sol is quick to stamp that down, reminding them that she's undisciplined, right? But this is when Vanessa Rowe makes her appearance, pointing out that despite being undisciplined, she eluded Sol, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, hey, you're kind of both right in the sense that she's, and we know this later because Vanessa mentions this to Sol specifically. She's less worried about May as being the threat and more about May's master being the threat,
Of
right?
course. Yeah.
But at the same time, understanding that because May is so well trained enough to kill two Jedi and to elude Saul, that she isn't to be taken lightly,
No, of course not.
right? Anyway, we get to see it's nice of her to have pre-programmed the slide that shows her dead Jedi on it already. She's killed two Jedi Masters, and then she
And then they go red.
changes to another slide. It's like, burn. Yeah,
It's like
hilarious.
you had to actively go do that.
Yeah, I know. But you want to tell a compelling story through your slideware, So
Of course. Yeah.
yeah. Venestra continues to point out that the strange coincidence that the Jedi, being targeted, including Sol, were the ones that were stationed on her home planet when she was a child, right? She says,
Right.
how odd, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the implication here is two things, right? We learn a couple things. A, the Jedi, when they say that they were just scouting that unscoutable planet, this unknown planet, it's a lie. They were stationed on that planet,
there.
right?
Yeah.
And there's four of them because there was a coven of witches,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That there was there was a threat there to them.
Right. So when they told them that it's just a coincidence that they were there, it's a lie. And then this idea that like, well, it's not a coincidence, or it is a coincidence, or it's odd, I guess the way she's put it, that they are the ones that's being targeted, seems to draw back to this, or draw a line back to whatever happened back on that planet 16 years ago,
Mhm.
where Venestra seems to be a little bit in the dark herself about what exactly happened there.
Yeah,
right?
I don't
So
think
she's
they
gonna
ever told them. That's the
Right.
feeling I'm getting, is that no one actually knows what happened there except those four Jedi.
Right. It's like, hey, it's so weird how the girl that we all thought was dead is coming back to murder all these Jedi, almost as if she's out for revenge. Why would that be, Saul? Question
Yeah.
mark.
Yeah,
Stare.
exactly. Like what happened over
Yeah.
there? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Venestra, can you also suspects that May was trained by a Jedi. She says even a hologram can tell me that. What do you think that means? Like, do you think she genuinely believes that this threat is a fallen Jedi? And if so, don't you think they'd have a good sense of who that might be?
Yeah, I don't know. I think she's just saying that it's obvious that it's a trained Force user, right? Like these aren't just people learning how to wield their Force on their own or whatever. Like she's like, it's obviously a threat, and it's something that they need to.
Well, no, she says specifically
act
it's
on.
trained
But
by
it's a
a
Jedi?
Jedi.
A Jedi,
Right.
yeah. I guess, yeah, they would. I'm assuming it's just because the way she's moving, right? But,
Mm,
or
right.
It's because it's OSHA. And they're the same.
Right, because she's literally the same person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but OSHA didn't get far enough into her training, right?
Well,
For her
maybe
to
she
be at
did.
that level. Yeah, I mean, okay, the crazy part of that theory that's the most compelling, by the way, is that we've never seen OSHA's forehead, which is, of
I
course,
mean,
would
you can
be
see
able
it
to delineate
enough.
who is and who isn't May or OSHA because she doesn't have the mark on her forehead. And if wouldn't it would be fucking wild if she pulled her hair back and she had that mark on her forehead?
That
That
would
would
be
be
insane.
like, I don't even know what I would make of that, to be honest.
That would be
But
insane because
I
I'm
feel
like
like something could be done there.
I'm almost positive in like the second episode or like the first episode when she's like running around on that ship, you can see her forehead like enough that you can see that
Yeah, that's
it's
probably
not
true.
there.
That's probably true.
That was like the first thing I was looking at when I saw her, and I was like, "What? Did she just wake up from a dream? What was that?"
Right. And also, how does she keep changing her hair? Just kidding. I mean,
Yeah, how does she grow her hair so fast?
That's a debate from 2 weeks ago. All right, so Mundi again here is ever the brown noser says we must alert the High Council, right? You know, one day in the future, you're going to be on that High Council and you're going to make your own stupid decisions, Caddy Mundi. That's okay.
Yeah.
Venestra pushes back on this. This is kind of another look at like the Jedi being too caught up in politics, right? And wanting to protect their image. I do find it interesting. Let me finish my thought here, which is say Venestra pushes back, saying that if they did that, the council would have to inform the Senate. Quote, a scandal like this would inspire fear and mistrust. We should handle this ourselves. We must learn who trained her. I do find it somewhat interesting, this idea that over the years, the Senate has been like, you guys have too much free reign to operate without any oversight.
Yeah.
And so we need you to be able to keep us in the loop in terms of like major threats that are going on. And at some point, the Jedi Council had to make concessions to the council, to the Senate, to be able to continue operating the way that they have. And that trade-off forces them to keep secrets.
Of course, yeah.
As a essentially de facto police force that the especially in this series, you know, they have real strong space cop vibes in this series, right? As a de facto police force, the idea that there'd be like all this internal corruption and this stuff, when we find out about that in the real world, that's very concerning. People get very worried about that.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, because of that very same reason, police departments spend a lot of time trying to cover up and prevent those types of stories from going wide. Right. So,
well, that's why there's like sometimes other governing bodies that have to like investigate, right? Like internal affairs have to investigate.
You can't be independent because you need to have oversight to, you know, and that's where this kind of like checks and balances thing comes in with the Senate, which I think is fascinating. We don't ultimately see that like play out in any way. We, you know, in the prequels, we see the odd meetings between the Jedi and the Chancellor, right? But by then, that point, they're already being manipulated, so we're not really getting a true example of that. And even in the prequels, it's like Yoda's like, "Oh, we shouldn't inform the Senate because it multiply our enemies will." Right? Again, the same idea that if the Jedi look weak, then it spurs on those who might be in a position or who want to get them out of the way to say, "Okay, now is their moment. They're weakened." Right?
Yeah.
So it puts them in this very difficult compromise position to say we can either be honest with the Senate and tell them what's going on and ultimately further weaken our position, which could ultimately mean handing over more power to the Senate, or we handle this ourselves, right? And compromise our integrity with the Senate, right?
Right, yeah.
Which ultimately puts them in the path down the road that we get to in the prequels, where that mutual mistrust is what allows Palpatine to easily blame the Jedi for trying to overthrow the government.
Manipulate everything too.
Right.
And then,
I think the best answer to this would be, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was going to say something stupid. So you finish your thought first.
No. You said, I think people should say more stupid stuff.
I was just going to say, I'm like, and this just proves that there's always been politics in Star Wars. It's always been about politics.
Not stupid. That's true. It's always, it's literally war is in the title. It's just, anyway. The solution to this, by the way, would be to have a secret um oversight committee, right? Like that they have this in the States, right? Like
More
the
secrets.
CIA and the FBI,
Mhm.
when they have to report into the government, they're not doing it in front of the public, right? They report
No.
into these secret courts and these things that were, okay, we've appointed these people, we trust them to handle these situations, and they'll make it public if they feel like it's in the best public interest. Of course, there's corruption involved in that too. So there's no, perfect answer. But the way you'd be like, okay, as the Jedi, we feel like we need to keep certain things under wraps. We will inform you in a non-public way
Right.
to the Senate so that we can maintain our mutual trust. But that it has to stay secret until it becomes something that's bigger that has to go wide.
Well,
right? And this is something that wouldn't have to go wide.
I totally get the point here about like kind of why she needs to tiptoe, because you can't just like go to the Senate and be like, oh, hey, yeah, I don't know. There's like some chick murdering a bunch of Jedi. Like she seems pretty pissed.
We
Not
don't
sure
have all the
about,
details.
So yeah, we'll talk to you later.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. But ultimately, it does put them in a position where they have to again compromise some of their own integrity to
right,
to maintain this high level of power that they have over the galaxy. Okay. Venestra instructs Holden to extract Kelnaka from his post on Kofar and intercept May. So he's putting Holden onto the case and not Saul.
right.
And so Holden asks, and if she doesn't come peacefully, implying that, like, what do I do if I need to fight her? Right. And I think this answer from Venestra is garbage. I don't expect it to come to that, she says.
Right.
Why would you? You have no reason to believe that. In fact, you have every reason to believe the opposite. She's already killed 2, targeted a 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
What
yeah,
do you mean you don't expect it to come to that? Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I know.
Arrogance.
I thought that was. Yeah, it won't. Yeah, don't worry about it. You'll be fine.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I'm not going to provide you any instruction because it's not going to happen. Right? It's stupid. It's so stupid. So after the meeting, Saul confronts Venestra. Venestra is like pretty pissed though that Saul didn't tell her about May, that she could have survived 16 years ago. She's like, "Why did you tell me?" And he's like, "I did tell you." He's like, "No, why did you tell me that she could have survived 16 years ago?" Saul vehemently argues though that he would have told her if he thought she could have survived.
Right.
Listen,
yeah,
it seemed impossible that she survived that fall into that bottomless pit. Who was I supposed to know that Star Wars would establish that people could survive falls into bottomless pits?
Everybody survives falls into pits in Star Wars.
Everyone knows that, right? So I wasn't aware. I wasn't informed until recently, and now that I know, I've told you, right? And she says no one could have survived that, which is a classic. Again, one of those, famous last words about really anybody. If anyone says no one could have survived that, they almost certainly survived that, except for MacGruber.
Yeah,
where his team explodes, and it's so funny. guys, anybody in there? Saul wants to be the one to bring in May, right? He's like, I love this is classic like cop show stuff, right? Like, you got to put me on the case, Captain. I have a feeling. I know I can do this, right? And she's like, no, you're too close to this.
Yeah, you're too close.
Pen
to
in
this.
your gun in your badge, right? And so she says your personal connections with her and her sister is not an asset here, which I actually think is a pretty, like,
I think that's correct.
Well-crafted way of saying that, which is to say, to avoid the conflict of what could be an argument and say, I know where you're coming from, but in this case, you are too close to it. And so you are compromised, basically. And I can't trust you to do the what's best for the Jedi and not what's best for May and Osha, right? Anyway, Saul argues that there's more to it than just May's revenge. It's like, that. It's not just this. He says, May's plan is not solely her own. Venestra seems to agree, saying that she's worried about a bigger picture. She says, quote,
right.
I fear that May is only a small part of her master's plan, a plan that is difficult to see, some sort of shift, something to tip the scales. So the first part of the sentence makes a lot of sense to me, right? She's obviously she's a pawn being used by some darker force, right? Some sort of phantom menace, one might say, right? a plan that is difficult to see, right? The Phantom of the Menace part, right? But what do you make of this? Some sort of shift, something to tip the scales. Why would she say that? Like, what makes her say that?
I think it's kind of along the lines of, like, when Yoda kind of says the same thing, when he's like, "Oh, it's shrouded, like I can't see it all. It's
Oh, right.
shrouded in darkness." Like, so I think
The shroud of the dark side has fallen.
yeah, like I think she's sensing that in the Force, that there's like a shift, or that there's like a disturbance, that kind of thing.
Sure, yeah.
Because I think like these certain Jedi who are very in tune with
Attuned.
things like that,
Yeah.
or a little bit more skilled.
Sensitive.
Yeah. So that's kind of like the vibe I get with her there, that she's just sensing that it's more. That's not just, this isn't just like a whatever assassin for her own revenge. Like there's a bigger picture, but she can't see it, right?
Yeah. I like that. I think that makes sense, right? This idea that like this master plan seems to be specifically trying to target us. I just ultimately feel like that line of some sort of shift, something to tip the scales, feels too on the nose,
right? Yeah,
as if they're tiptoeing around this is the Sith, but don't want to say that,
becoming unbalanced,
right? And I think that type of language would have felt more at home here,
right?
But like, what do you mean some sort of shift? Like, because some Jedi have been targeted? What, like, how is that a shift in what way?
Unless like she's just literally talking about like tip, because what did she say? Tipping?
Something to tip the scales.
Tip the scales. I'm wondering if she means more on the terms of how, like, at this point in time, the Jedi are the cops and they're telling other people, you can't train kids and you can't do this. So maybe she means like in that term, like someone else is trying to take over, like almost like their job. Like,
or maybe trying to like paint the Jedi in a more in a darker light,
like
right?
not necessarily Sith, but just of like how things are run right now, and
tip the scales of power. They're in charge,
yeah,
and someone's trying to knock them off the pedestal,
exactly.
which will of course work, but not for another 100 years,
right?
So Saul worries that if Holden takes down May, he's like, if she's already saying she wants to spark up that lightsaber, right? And that they lose, and they she takes down May, right? That they'll lose any path to finding out who her master is, right? The bigger picture. This next part also a little confusing, although I think the answer is fairly clear. She will not surrender without getting something in return. And then Vanessa says, do we have something she wants? And they cut away. The next time we see Saul, he's confronting Osha. I guess the argument is that Osha is something she wants.
I think so, yeah.
This is another example of like, I don't feel like we need this line here. You could just cut away before this.
Well, he kind of like
leaves
nods
a more lasting impression
or whatever to there. So,
but like, what do you mean she won't surrender without something in return? Like, what makes you say that? Like, I think you can't just say that and just be like, okay, well, if you say so, there's nothing. I don't think there's anything from our past interactions with May that would suggest that she's looking for anything but revenge. Right.
Yeah.
So
I think that's part of it too. Like, she wants something in return, as like to make her in place of that revenge, or like in place of to like make her feel better. Like, her getting her sister back is, because if she's doing this out of revenge because she thought her sister was dead, that's one thing. But now that her sister's alive, it's like, oh, okay, well, having her back should give her what she wants. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I guess, I don't know. For me, this line of this dialogue here, this last bit of dialogue, a little clunky.
Yeah, I get that.
My thinking. Okay, so we go back to Kofar. Kymir is asking, like I said, that was a really tense, like not tense, but dense bit of screen stuff. We had Ki-Adi-Mundi in there. We had all this Jedi speculation, politics, etc. Now we can get back to the fun of stuff. Kofar. Kymir is asking May about killing Jedi without a weapon. Like, what is that, a test? Like, how does that work? He says, can you use their saber if you disarm them?
Right.
Or is that cheating?
Remember, you asked that.
Yeah. And I actually love this line because it's like, oh, they're going right. They're hitting the nail right on the head. Right. The show is going right out just with the Ki-Adi-Mundi thing, getting out in front of it and saying, oh no, we already thought about this.
Yeah.
Right. These questions that you're going to ask, we already asked that, and we're going to address it here and now.
Exactly.
Right? I also love how you waved that stick around.
Yeah.
Like, like a lightsaber, which everyone's waved a stick around like a lightsaber
100%.
before. So very relatable.
Adam does that all the time.
Chimera says that she's failed so much, which I thought this line is like, what are you going to do? Because just like you failed so many times. So like, I just don't know what you're going to do. But May doesn't agree. Chimera pushes back that she killed these other Jedi her way.
Mm-hmm.
And that, quote, your master, right? Again, almost speaking in first person here, or third person here, which is funny, wants you to, quote, well, he gets cut off here. Your master wants you to, and then gets cut off, right? Again, this kind of like language that feels very on point about him specifically trying to provide insight into his own test that he's imposing on her, right? I'm giving you this test. Let me give you some like additional context, right? Like, I think he wants her to probe at this idea of like, can I use their lightsaber?
Right. Yeah.
Because I think he should be like, well, can I? And he'd be like, I think so. Yeah. And like give her the ability to like learn a little bit more about what she's expected to do. Right.
Right.
Again, assuming that he's the master, which we can all pretty much assume at this point. Boy, will we look dumb if that's not the case, but I think it's pretty obvious. He says, I didn't, actually, sorry, let me back up here. He gets cut off because May is like, wait a minute, you're speaking a lot for on behalf of the master. What kind of deal did you make?
Yeah, right. Like she's
right?
Like, what are you getting out of this? Yeah.
Yeah, like how would you even know this information? Right? You're no Sith Lord, right?
Yeah, like how do you know what's going on?
No. He says, I didn't, we didn't exactly, I just owe him.
Right.
You know how he is. He collects people.
I like that.
It is, I do like that. What do you think? Like he says, I didn't, we didn't exactly.
I think I didn't strike a deal. We didn't strike a deal. Right. Like,
okay.
Yeah.
Right. You know how he is. He just collects people. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, speaking to this kind of mutual understanding that they have of him, that he's just like this type that knows everybody. Okay. All right. Fair enough. May, I love how she's really picking at him this entire episode. You know, I think she doesn't put it all together here, but she is certainly skeptical of some of this guy, and like why he's offering all this free advice and why he's trying to help her so much, and like it's just a red flag to her.
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
May asks if she's ever seen his face. The answer is, you know that I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It's the way he said that line specifically that I was like,
Well, why would she know that he hasn't? Why would he ask her that? Or why would she ask him that if she knew that he hasn't? Right.
Yeah.
So
again,
it seems it's a little bit of like a knee-jerk reaction there, a little quick on the trigger. Chimera interrupts this line of questioning, though, by pointing out that they've spotted the perimeter, whatever that means. Chimera typically, or has proven to be typically, very good at changing the subject.
Yes.
When things aren't going the way he likes. May gives him a weird look, seemingly weighing what, if she should say the thing that she's going to say next, if she should say it at all, right? She says, I can't believe my sister is Jedi scum. There's part of this that's like, feels like she's trying to say the things that she knows he wants him to hear, right?
Right, yeah.
I can't believe my sister is Jedi scum, obviously alluding to like the way that the Empire always talked about the rebel scum.
Mm-hmm.
What was she like when you spoke to her? She's like, well, tell me about my sister. Like, what's her whole deal, right? And this is where we get that line I mentioned earlier. She seemed in over her head, honestly, right? Again, this idea that I think from Chimera's perspective, assuming he's the master, sees Osha really as a pawn, as we talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
Not in tune enough with the Force to be like, oh, you know how Vader's like, oh, you have a sister, right? Right. And how it's like, oh, well, if it doesn't work out with you, I can always go find your sister and I can convert her to the dark side.
Yes,
whatever,
yes, exactly.
Right? In this case, I don't get the sense that he sees Osha in that way.
No.
May is my student who has the talent, has imbued with this extra Force ability.
Right.
Osha doesn't have that.
No.
And is basically unimportant to me. And the fact that she's involved is annoying.
Yeah.
I think is his stance.
Yeah, exactly. If anything, he would just like use her as leverage or like use her against, in the way that somehow.
In the way that you could almost see it, him using her in the way that Palpatine uses Padme.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As this kind of like emotional weak point that if you can exploit in just the right way,
yeah,
you can really like, wrap your fingers around somebody. So he says she seemed really fond of that one Jedi. What was his name again? Soul? Again, it seems like what he's trying to do is kind of drive a wedge.
Yeah, he's trying to provoke
Between,
her for
yeah,
sure.
right.
Yeah.
Jealousy,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Again, change the subject. Anyways, let's get going.
Yeah.
I think it's so funny. Hey, we're having this really important conversation about what your sister's like, who you just learned was alive.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
let's
go.
not talk about that right now, even though we have much more
Yeah.
walking.
Anyways,
to do.
it's uninteresting to me.
Yeah. May continues to give him a funny look here. I just like the way that she's kind of like
Processing.
really processing, questioning, kind of like, why is he trying to change the subject? What is the deal with this stuff? Right. And maybe her assumption here isn't that she's not putting the pieces together that he's the master, but more that he's there to like keep an eye on her.
Yeah.
And like, and is representing the master in this scenario. And she would like a little bit more freedom. Right. So we get another wide shot of them walking down a mountain path. Maybe this is when you thought it looked kind of Lord of the Rings.
That's exactly the shot,
like
that I was thinking of.
Really beautiful, again, on location here, obviously. And if not, really well done.
Yeah.
if it wasn't. So back on Coruscant, May is chatting with Pip as she heads for the transport to leave. She's having this little conversation like, I'm glad we got you serviced. It's like the day we met, which is a cute little backstory thing. Pip is giving her some sass, though, about like, well, why didn't you clean me up? And he's like, well, I would if I had the tools.
Love a sassy droid.
You love a sassy. All droids, I think, are sassy in some way or another, even when they're gonk droids.
Yeah.
Play the gonk droid sound just for fun here, because it's been too long. Maybe I should get a Pip sound too. I don't know.
Oh, maybe.
I have been meaning to like really level up the soundboard here.
Update your soundboard, yeah.
Anyway, this whole thing, this is another good scene. This is another example of like being able to develop characters in these kind of 1v1 conversations. We get a lot of those. We had Saul and Venestra before that give us some insight into their past and some of their characterization. We get this example here again. The conversation with with Osha and Jecki is another great example of that. And again, obviously what we just had with Chimere and May.
Right.
So we get another one here. Saul catches up to her just as she's about to leave. He wants her help, wants her to come with him on this new mission, right? This is so sad. Osha says, "You want me to rejoin the Jedi?" ? And it's like so hopeful.
Yeah.
Like she wanted that question to be asked of her so badly. This is why it's, obviously you think of Ahsoka, right?
Yeah.
And there's when Ahsoka's offered the olive branch by Anakin, it's like, come back, you can come back, and she refuses it, right?
Right.
But you could imagine a world where all she wants is for Anakin to come and ask her back, right? And that's kind of the sense I get here is like, I am good enough, I can be a Jedi. You see that in me, right? Because again, there's just so much self-doubt that she has, and just Saul's like kind of like political, well, not officially,
right? Yeah.
Response is such a kick in the nuts. I feel like, that line really got to me.
I know.
Yeah,
not officially. I know it's a very Mace Windu line.
Oh well, we get
real Mace another Windu one line later.
Yeah. Thanks, citizen.
Yeah.
Anyway, you need me so you can get you. She says, "You need me so you can get to her." So I can't. Right away, she's putting the piece together. You want to use me to get to May, and if you want to use me in that way, it's too hard for me, and I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in that. And I think that's totally fair. If you want to just use me as a tool, I'm not prepared to do that, and that's, I think, totally fair to say. Saul says that when she told May, this is her like his way of softening her. Saul says that when he told May that Osha was alive, it was like she became a different person. And honestly, this is pretty cool because I feel like we genuinely get to see that play out in this episode, right? He's worried that she'll get hurt and that if she agrees to go, they will both get to go and keep her safe, right? And then we get this classic Star Wars line, "There's still good in her," right? Which, of course, we've heard a million times.
Yeah, so many times.
Right. But again, obviously, when we think of it most, we think of Vader, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, this example, I think most, and of course, obviously with Anakin too, but who's also Vader, but earlier, um, there's this line here that extends the part of her that loves you,
Hmm.
right? The part of Vader that loves his son, right? Um, that's that spark of good that you can exploit as the Jedi to kind of pull them
Yeah.
back to the light, right? Um, and of course, I love Osha's response. She's a murderer. Like, how can I? That might be true, but she still killed two Jedi, right?
Yeah.
And this is where we get that funny response from a Jedi, which is, "But she's still your family, right? Like, how the hell would you know? You left your family at 4 years old,
Right.
you hypocrite." Um. Anyway, she reluctantly agrees. I think this is, again, we talked about this earlier. Why didn't she want to say goodbye to Soul? She knew that this was coming, and she wanted to try to escape before she was pulled back in. It was her kind of last ditch attempt to pull herself out of the situation before she knew she could get pulled back in. Soul is a weakness for her also, right? As her former master, that
Absolutely. Whoop, sorry.
if he asked for her help, she's going to say yes.
Yeah,
Although,
100%. Hi, am I still here?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I hear you.
Sorry.
Did you cut out there for a
Yeah,
second?
my computer just did a boop.
Did a thing?
Did a thing. It's all
Okay.
fine. Um,
Okay. I love how when she says, "Okay, I'll come, but I'm not wearing that stupid civilian robe." And then the very next shot, she's wearing that civilian robe. And it's so funny. I think that's like solid Star Wars humor in my opinion.
yeah, I love it. It's yeah, that stupid civilian robe.
Yeah.
Did you think that
Uh,
her actual like outfit later looked kind of like it had like the same shape to me as Leia's on Endor?
like the poncho on Endor,
Yeah,
I thought the
yeah.
same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
100%. I think that's intentional. It's kind of got like a faux camo vibe going on.
Yeah,
It's got
yeah.
buttons on the front for seemingly no reason, which is a classic Star Wars move.
Always, yeah.
Um,
No
yeah.
reason buttons.
Yeah, on clothes that's why it's weird. Anyway, she's wearing the robe, which is funny, and Yord is giving a briefing. And this is the second big cameo we get in this episode where we see Plo Koon is here, which is many
Yeah.
people's favorite Jedi, including Dave Filoni's. And I really dig Plo Koon.
He's so
It's
cool.
unclear if he's a Padawan here or if he's more of a full-fledged Jedi or how old he is. Again, we don't know how old Plo Koon is. I don't
No.
think in the prequels. So seeing him here is just a cool connection back to the prequels that there are characters here that we're familiar with,
Yeah.
but they're not in positions of power, which is
Yeah. Yoda's
but it
around
informs their
somewhere.
decisions later. Yes, he is in a position of power,
Yeah,
but
he
he's
is.
also several hundred years old.
Yeah.
So you can forgive that. I was actually thinking about this the other day. You know, we now learn that like several of the species in the Jedi can live like several lifetimes compared
Yes, of
to
course.
a human being, right?
Hmm.
It seems weird to me that you'd ever let a human being on the Jedi Council at all because their perspective would be so narrow compared
Yeah.
to obviously Yoda being the like extreme example
Like
at like 900
800.
years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it's like
But
a
like
50-year-old man. You'd be like, you're a baby. Like, get out of here. You don't know
right,
anything.
exactly. Like
Yeah.
what could you possibly contribute to this high council that Mundi, who's 200 years old,
Yeah.
can't provide?
Has been a
right?
Jedi for 100 years longer than you've been
Yeah,
alive.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like maybe they want the fresh blood, or maybe humans have this kind of special innate ability that makes them a little bit more, you know,
I would assume
tuned or something. I don't know.
You kind of would want to like balance that council with ages like that, like as well,
Yeah, I
because
suppose that.
right? But yeah, it is funny to think about when you've got other
Yeah,
species
like a
on the
50-year-old
council.
Mace Windu,
Mhm.
right? And he's like, yeah, I mean, you're an older Jedi and you're talented, but like
I
compared to what Yoda has to say, like
Yeah,
he sometimes like overrides Yoda's stuff, and it's like you shouldn't be doing that.
I thought they have said too that like Mace Windu is actually like older. Like
Well,
he's
maybe
he's supposed to be like 80 or something when he dies, and he doesn't like look 80. You know what I
really?
mean?
Oh, he's
Yeah.
great shape for 80. Well,
Mhm.
let's call it that. Okay, so I'll just read what Yord's briefing is because some of it's you kind of hear in the background, but you can see it in the subtitles. The Order stationed Kelnaka on Kofar, but no one has heard from him in over a year. He's been unresponsive to our warning transmissions. Communication towers in the area may be down. Due to difficulty of this mission, I advise all of you to stick together. So he's just going like giving like a classic like cop briefing,
Yes,
which is
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Meanwhile, Pip is arguing with this weird dog / rat creature who's named Basil. Ultimately ending up spraying it in the face with like, it's unsure if that's water or like
Oil.
coolant or
Yeah.
something or oil. It's so funny. But I do love, again, a sassy droid.
Mm-hmm.
OSHA asks about this is one of my favorite like pure just like solid line readings.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so good. Everything here, it's like OSHA. She's like shh. And then she's like, they're like getting into this whole thing. She's like, I'm so sorry. Then she goes up to Jackie and like whispering while Yord's doing this briefing.
Just
And he's
not
like,
listening.
yeah. And I love how he's just like, he's like, is that, is he it? They with us? Like, yes, she doesn't know how to refer to it.
Yeah.
And like, he's like, I was like, oh, that's Basil. And, like the way that it comes out is just so matter of fact.
Just matter
it's
of
funny
fact.
too.
I really like the way Jackie does her like line reading because she's so kind of like monotone sometimes and very like matter of fact. Like she doesn't have a lot of emotion in the way she speaks, but I like that a lot. It's like a very good character trait.
Oh, we got sirens going down the street again.
No. Typical.
Anyway, it is funny. It's just like, oh yeah, it's Basil, my friend Basil.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's here.
Yeah.
He's coming along.
This side chatter catches the attention of Yord though, and she's like,
of course.
And he does. This is where we get the Mace Windu line, asking if the civilian has any questions.
He's such a dick.
And he's such a dick, especially because he knows her from before. It's like,
right?
You don't have to act this way.
Yeah.
It just feels so. He's such. I think someone called him a hipster in a podcast I was listening to.
A hipster?
Or a video I watched.
I kind of get more of like what's the word? Like when like somebody's like a
brown
new
noser?
Yeah, like they're like a new cop. And so they're just like trying extra hard. Like he's kind of like a try hard, but like has a bit too much ego, and
they're trying to force people to respect them by being like,
yes, it's like
I have this authority, so you have to respect me because I have this authority. When really respect is earned, and you can't just rely on your badge to get it. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and again, I love OSHA's reading here. No, very comprehensive briefing, Yord.
Yeah.
And like, or very comprehensive briefing, Yord.
Yeah.
And
good job.
The way she says Yord, in like just this very like friendly way, and he's like, and gives her this funny look. I just think this whole sequence is very funny.
It's very good,
and like a really good like palette reset before we get over to Kofar again. Okay, so over on Kofar, speaking of which, the Jedi land their ship at some small port town. Jackie uses some type of translator device, which is, I don't know if we've seen anything like that before, but it's very cool. Very Star Trek, I guess, again. With an alien who seems to like speak in only like burp-like sounds and like groans and stuff.
Yeah.
She's asking about the Wookiee. But that alien though has this weird, he has like a cool like Mandalorian style like wrist gauntlet on. I don't know if you caught that.
I did not catch that.
It's got like the little like I don't know how to describe it, like little arrows that they have.
Oh yeah.
In in the arm.
Yeah.
And I was like, is that a Mandalorian piece of armor? I don't know, but weird that this random alien on this random backwater planet has it though, because this is obviously at the time where I don't know. I guess what would be happening with Mandalore at this time? Would they be in the middle of their civil war?
Maybe. I don't know.
Potentially. I don't know.
I'm not as familiar with that timeline.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, we need to pick up the pace here. We're almost through there's not that much left. So they're using the translator. They get this information. The Wookiee went off into the woods and hasn't been seen again since. Meanwhile, though, we get this other fun like interaction between Yord and Yord and OSHA. Sorry, it's not my fault. They're twins. Yord and OSHA. As he's like, I'm gonna have to ask you to give me back that blaster.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, this is my blaster now. And he's like, well, technically it's the property of the Jedi Order, so I'm gonna need it back.
So
and
annoying.
Again, that's like really just like, man, like give it a rest already.
You know what? You know what vibe Yord gives me? He gives me the type of guy who would call the cops on his own house party because it was getting too out of hand.
Oh my god, totally. Yes. That's exactly
like,
right.
But then like not tell anybody. He would just like
he's the teacher's pet, right?
Yeah.
Like that's who he is. Yeah. He's from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He's Amy from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
He's Amy. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, right. Everything's by the book. All right, so they're interrupted, though, so they don't have to finish this whole argument. As Jackie returns with news that Kalnaka ventured off into the forest and never came back. They look over, like, this whole team of Jedi look out over the dark forest. Kalnaka is in there, Sol says. He's kind of like sensing things. He seems to be sensing a lot now.
Right, yeah.
He seems maybe trying a little bit harder than he was before, because he didn't seem to be very good at sensing stuff in the first 2 episodes. Anyway, they're like, how are we going to find him? Oh, we have a tracker, and that's Basil. He's like a bloodhound. They give him like a piece of a scarf that Kalnaka had or something, and then they're off and running. So we cut to a wide shot, the whole team hiking along the mountain pass with Basil leading the way. We also get another really funny exchange with Yord and Osha again. And I thought this one, like, it gets deeper, but the beginning of it is funny.
Mm-hmm.
Yord, do you understand what Basil is saying? And do you understand what the Basil is saying? She says. And I love Yord. He gives this like exasperated, like, first of all, his name is Basil.
Yeah.
And yes. And then this is where that like the hipster thing comes in. It's like, although most Padawans want to learn Shriwook, I took it upon myself to learn a language a little more nuanced. It's like,
yes.
Okay, buddy.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, don't use anything. Don't learn anything useful by any means.
Learn how to speak. I mean, I guess learning to speak with your bloodhound is pretty convenient.
Yeah, that's true. I would learn how to speak dog if I could.
Me too. I just want to know what Winston's thinking all the time. He's lying down, sleeping behind me.
Oh, it's a good boy.
Yeah, he's a good boy. And he only barked once, I think, when Kara came home. Anyway, Osha pauses here. He's like, okay, well, now that I have your attention, and has like this like one-on-one with Yord here, right? And asks him straight up if he's upset that she's on this mission. Like, hey, what's your deal with me, man? Like, I didn't do anything to you. I didn't ask to be here, right? And he says he's not. He says that he's really just concerned for her safety. And I actually I think he genuinely believes that.
Yeah, I would have believed that too.
Right?
Yeah.
That like, yeah, we had a past, but this is a dangerous mission and you're not a trained Jedi.
And you're not trained, yeah. And, like, why are you here?
And like, right. And that puts you in danger, and it puts me in danger because I have to make sure to protect you.
Well, exactly.
Right?
It makes his job more difficult.
All right. So Osha, uses this moment to ask him a favor. He says, Osha is worried that Saul is being too optimistic about what's going on with May. She wants him to promise her that if May doesn't listen to her, that he won't hesitate to stop her.
Right.
Like, hey, if she keeps going, you got to put her down.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
I understand. Like, I won't be able to do it.
Like someone has to.
And someone has to.
Yeah.
Right. And I trust you. Right. She says, I can't hesitate a second time. I think this is so cool that she said that, because it's this like admission of, again, she's in this path of self-guilt, but and trying of self-doubt and discovery and all that stuff. But that she admits basically to herself and to him that she had a chance to stop her before, and because she hesitated, she was able to get away, and they were put into this position, right? So she's just saying, like, I'm too weak to do it. You need to do it, right? And I think that's like a strong admission. Only someone who is confident
for sure.
in their own self. Despite she's doing this out of fear, it's not easy to admit that.
No, it's not. It takes a lot to be able to admit that and to ask somebody to do that for you, for sure.
Yeah. She says, Yord says, I've known you since we were younglings. May has always been your wound. Maybe Saul brought you here to face her, but maybe he brought you here to face yourself. This is another Jediism that I think is pretty strong.
Right.
I think it's really cool that it comes from Yord here. We've been dunking on Yord, and I think rightly so.
We've been dunking on
but at the same time, he has done the schooling, right? And he does have some knowledge in this. He knows Osha. I think this kind of glimpse into this former relationship, we've seen a lot from Osha's side where she's very chummy with him.
Right, yeah.
Right? And where Yord is trying to like distanced himself from that because he wants the respect of his fellow Jedi, and he doesn't
Exactly.
want to look
Yeah.
like he's soft,
Mm-hmm.
right? And has these attachments. But he's able to be alone here with her for a moment and say, because he's not surrounded by anyone else. And it's a bit on Yord for being a bit of a douche, not being able to say this in front of other people, but that he knows he understands where she's coming from, and that Saul's a wise Jedi, and that he may be putting her in this position to help her overcome this self-doubt, and that she
Mm-hmm.
should be open to that concept. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. No.
Any other thoughts on that?
No. I like their kind of dynamic between those two. Like but you're right. Like he is trying to distance himself, but I think he's still trying to like teach her a little bit too, and like help her out. And even though he is kind of like not stuck up, but he has a stick up his butt a little bit.
He does have a stick up his butt.
But I feel like he's kind
He
of
has his saber. He needs to pull his saber out of his butt.
Yeah, I bet he's always been like that. Like even when they were younger, like younglings
Yes,
together, I
it'll
bet he
stick
was
in the
always
mud.
kind of like that. And maybe May wasn't, or not May. Osha was not as much like that, right? So, but yeah,
Right.
no, I like the dynamic of those two when they get to have these conversations with each other.
Yeah, it's like that May just wants to tell him to like relax a bit.
Yes.
Just like chill out, man.
Yes, yeah.
Right. Anyway, back with May and Chimera, they reach this hard to pass area in the woods, and they venture deeper into the forest. And we're just checking in with them at this point. Meanwhile, the Jedi pass into a dark spot of the forest, and we get these like weird trees with these growths, what look like growths on them. Basil says that there is something rotten in this part of the forest, and they think they should keep moving. Saul says, "Keep up the pace, but keep down the volume." I love that line. I think it's a fun.
It's a good one.
Yeah,
I'm gonna use that.
Yeah, keep up the pace, but keep down the volume. Good for all sorts of situations. Osha pauses here, and we find out later what's going on. She senses the creature, right? And this is a feeling that she's kind of lost. So she's in the present. She's in the process of trying to recapture this connection to the Force, right? So she senses this bug thing, right? And like reaches out to touch it, and both physically and through the Force. And by doing so, she wakes it up. And as she walks away, we get the first of the same move they really do, which is a classic horror move, which is to have something happen behind a character's back out of focus.
Right. Yeah.
That it just inherently makes it feel more creepy because your character that you're, POVing with is unaware of this creepy thing that's happening behind them. We've all had the feeling of something watching you or something behind you, right? And so that's a classic horror move that they do in filmmaking when they want to make something scary. And to me, it's effective. It's a gross bug thing.
Yeah.
I don't like bugs.
I don't.
Anyway.
See, it's funny to me because it's like a moth, right? That's the same thing?
Yeah.
Or, yeah. I was like, I don't
I think that's what they call it. They kind of call it a moth. Yeah.
I don't find moths scary. I know a lot of people do.
They're so gross looking. I hate them all.
I think they're so cool
gross.
looking. I'm like, they're like a fuzzy butterfly. They're just fluffier. See, that's funny. I don't get that. I'm like, I think they're cute.
No, not at all.
Just no, not at all.
Keep those disgusting things away from me. Thank you. Anyway, I also think that butterflies are pretty gross up close, to be honest. So
you're a weirdo.
They look good from afar, but once you get up close, it's like, oh, look at this gross thing. Anyway, it appears that this creature is able to fly. Again, we assume this is a moth, maybe in like a pupal stage, and then it grows its wings. And then May calls for Saul's help. He tells all the other Jedi to stand down, and then he pulls out his blue saber, looking very cool. I thought the sabers looked very good in this episode. I don't know what was different, if they slenderized the blade a little bit.
They're very bright.
Or they brighten them up. I think they just look really badass. The HDR makes them pop. And then he cuts this thing right in half, which is always fun when sabers can cut stuff in half. Always appreciate that. And then the other Jedi are like, it went straight for the saber. It's attracted to the light.
Yeah.
I feel like we didn't need that extra dialogue.
It's a background. We get it.
Yeah, we get it. Anyway, he cuts it in half and urges them to hurry up to avoid traveling at night. They're like, we need to keep moving. Any other thoughts on this like confrontation with the moth?
Not really. It was just kind of like I think just like a fun little way to show that she is still connected to the Force.
Yes.
And, get to see a lightsaber cut him off in half. So for all you bug haters.
Yeah, I'm I was happy about it. They continue into the forest, and Osha continues to doubt herself. She confiding in Jackie this time. Quote, I was able to sense that creature, but I disturbed it, and now it's dead. So she's feeling guilty. She's saying, if I was maybe stronger with the force, I wouldn't have led that creature to its own death.
Right, yeah.
And Jackie's response is, it's always an honor to get to witness anything or anyone transform into the force, which is a callback to a line of Yoda talking to Anakin about that as it relates to his mother. And
Right.
was bad advice then.
Yeah.
It's not really going to, oh, don't worry, your mother's going to transform back into the force.
Yeah, it's like, that's not helpful.
Yeah, but not that helpful. Come on, Yoda.
It's like when people
We're
talk
not all
about
800
like
years old.
heaven. You're like, that's not like helpful.
Yeah.
You're
no,
like, okay,
thanks,
cool,
though.
thanks.
Right.
Yeah.
All dogs go to heaven, but I still don't want Winston to die.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, she though she admits that Osha is much more familiar with death than her. Although I will admit it's been a while since we've heard anyone talk about the idea of death as transforming into the Force.
Yeah,
but I think
true.
it's a beautiful
It is
Jedi
very
way of
beautiful.
expressing it. I think it's cool. Osha admits that she could, quote, never accept death like a true Jedi should. And Jedi catches her on this true Jedi bit, right?
Right.
Like, what do you mean by true Jedi, right? And like questioning her own preconceived notions of what that means, right? Jackie, who's further along in her training, I think, than Osha was when she quit, or at least maybe around the same time, and has, is closer to the Jedi in all this, and she's been there for her entire life, didn't quit, right? And so her understanding of what a true Jedi is going to be different from what Osha thinks it is, and part of the reason why exploring why Osha would have left in the first place, right? And so, what do you mean by true Jedi? Osha says, I couldn't accept what I lost, which, of course, fair. That's a lesson that we've heard the Jedi teach throughout all sorts of media, right? Learn to, what is it Yoda says? Learn to accept the things what's the line? We can't let go, or something like that. It's along those lines, right? This idea that by accepting that that we can let things go, we in fact empower ourselves to do that exact thing. Anyway, she says she felt it was unfair of just talking about her sister's death. She also felt resentment, but also missed her at the same time. Like all these emotions that are tied to attachment. So Osha understands that these are weaknesses in it from a Jedi perspective, that by feeling those things that she's not strong enough, as she puts it, to deny those feelings and move past them.
Right.
And the hardest things that the Jedi say, like the things that, like death, are the hardest things to let go of,
right,
because they're so permanent. And it's pretty, again, this is another example of how she has this like ability to reflect on herself and say, oh no, I wasn't good enough, and that's why I quit.
Yeah.
Because I had these weaknesses, and I still have them. But we get this great line from Jackie: we're not defined by what we lose, we're defined by what we survive. And you've survived a lot. And I think Jackie is a great Jedi.
Me too.
I think she's like so attuned with people, right? Has like this strong empathy, right? And that she carries and can sense people and like what truly matters to them. And is able to ask smart questions and kind of reset things when they feel like they're getting out of calibration. It's a great role, and I think that she does a great job with it here.
Yeah, I like her a lot.
Any other thoughts on this?
No, I like that. I like that how soft she's being with her, like how, not in a bad way, but she's trying to teach her to like, no, like that's not a bad thing, right? Like it's like kind of you didn't have to quit, actually. Like, but yeah, I just like Jackie. I like all these interactions that we're getting with her in this episode.
Well, it's just, again, we're just learning so much more about Jackie's perspective on the Jedi and Osha's perspective on it's just, I think these are things that we needed maybe earlier in the series.
Yeah,
ultimately.
I would agree.
Right. So back with May, Kymir is excited that they're close. Only 10 minutes south, he says, which means that they'll get there before sundown. But May insists she needs a moment to rest, so she's ready to fight. She's like, well, I got to fight a Wookiee when we get there, so I need a breath. May says, as she kind of sits down and starts talking with Chimera, she says, "It's not a test; it's a final lesson."
Mm-hmm.
Talking about the kill a Jedi without a weapon concept, right? He's quoting the master. She says, "Your final lesson is one you teach yourself. You will kill a Jedi without a weapon." May starts to unpack that a little bit with Chimera, noting that, quote, "Attacking a defenseless person goes against everything the Jedi stands for.
Right.
How do you kill someone like that?
Mm-hmm.
Unarmed. It's not a test. It's impossible." How do you think she comes to that conclusion?
See, that's kind of what I was wondering too, because I'm like, well, in like a Sith way, like, yeah, like I just feel like she's having a hard time wrapping her head around it because she has a hard time thinking about killing like almost like a defenseless person, right?
Yeah,
Because she's
I
like,
think
how
so
am I
too.
supposed to kill them without a weapon? And like, if they're not fighting back, like, because her whole thing is like, she wants them to attack her and she keeps trying to
Right.
goad them to attacking her and they won't. And that's like, to me, that's not the point. It's more about the Sith wants her to
It's
just
it,
kill a Jedi, right?
right.
Without a weapon, like with her bare
fall
hands.
into your darkest part of
Hmm.
your body, of your soul,
Yeah.
and reject
Hmm.
this reluctance to fight honorably.
Yes,
It's not
exactly.
about
No,
honor.
it's not.
It's about power.
Yeah.
And you can take it from somebody by killing them. And it doesn't matter if you fight fair or they're fighting fair or
No,
unfair. You need to,
like,
if you can cast off these last shackles of like humanity,
yeah,
basically,
it's about,
of your humanity, you can truly tap into the true power of the dark
yeah.
side.
And like taking advantage
Right.
of the situation, right? Too. And it's
Right.
just, yeah, and I think that's the whole part that she's not really getting. But,
But I think it's weird to say it's impossible,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Because what she's really saying, it's impossible for me.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't fight someone like that.
Hmm.
I can't do that. I thought I was what I thought I was getting out of this relationship with the master was a pathway to revenge, right? To get the
Right.
things that I wanted, right? Not to be exploited or manipulated, right? That you were giving me, you being Darth Teeth, Chimere, or the Master in this case, you were giving me the tools to free myself, right?
Hmm.
I think what through passion comes power, and through power comes freedom. I think was right, something like that for the or the Sith code, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
what she thought was happening, but what she didn't realize is that it's a poison pill, right?
Hmm.
That to accept that learning, to go into to that place means to give up everything it was that led you to wanting to have revenge in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. So again, these are really fascinating conversations that I just wish we'd had maybe 2 episodes sooner.
Yeah.
Because now as everyone hates the show, and it's a shame. And that's not true. Not everyone, just the haters.
Just the
But
haters.
I
Yeah.
think they need to give it another chance.
Yeah.
But if they're listening at an hour and a half into this podcast, it's too late. they're not like, you have to assume that they're not listening this far.
It's
And
true.
those who are, first of all, commend you. Thank you
Yeah,
for listening this
thanks.
far. Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Okay. So let's wrap this up. Chimere tries to encourage her, but she truly seems to think it's impossible. Worse, that if she fails her master, they'll kill her anyway. Right? She's kind of like between a rock and a hard place. Right?
Mhm.
I can't do it, and if I can't do it, I'm going to be killed. And if I can't kill the unarmed Jedi, they're going to kill me. So, what do I do? Right? And then she says, "You don't even care," which I think is a test for Chimere. Right? She is testing Chimere here, but Chimere insists he does, which is this moment where I was talking about this earlier. It does genuinely sound like he does care.
It does,
right?
yeah.
And he does go out to go get her water, or maybe that's when he goes to kill. It's possible that that's when he goes to kill.
True.
But I think it's the saber cut on Kalnaka is so fresh that I don't think that's what it is. Like, it's
No.
still steaming.
Yeah.
At that point, right? Like, it had just happened like
Like minutes before. Yeah.
So I don't think that's what it is. So this seems like he's genuinely going to go, wants to help her. So if that's the case, it's certainly an interesting, different approach to a dark side user who seems much more like a normal person when they're not.
Yeah,
in the cloak,
that's why I
as it
still
were.
feel like there's more to him. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Maybe he's like maybe he has multiple personalities.
Maybe he's just a creep.
Well, then, like, maybe he's like genuinely like this is one, like
It's
he
true.
genuinely doesn't
That
know
would
that
be
he's
kind
both
of
people,
cool. That would be very cool.
right? I'm open to that.
Yeah.
I'm okay. That's a new one. Um. Anyway, he says you're losing your nerve, and we don't want that. So he runs off. When he's gone, she like seems to drop the facade. Right? She's not actually that tired. She pulls out a rope out of her bag. You're like, well, that's interesting. We get another shot of the sun nearly setting as that Jedi continue their search. This is that ticking clock now. But I don't think you do a very good job of establishing why nighttime is such a big deal.
Yeah,
But
not really.
whatever. Um, seemingly having lost Basil, right? They're like, oh man, we're really lost now. We get this funny line from Jord. I swear we need a tracker just to track our tracker, which is funny. And then they hear a scream. It's May. She's screaming for help. But this is all turns out to be a ruse. Chimere, we cut back to May. Chimere comes sprinting around the corner and gets caught in what's that called? A
Oh,
snare,
snare. Yeah.
right? And gets pulled up into a tree, hanging upside down by his foot. And then May comes around and she does her whole like monologuing thing that villains usually do. She says, after running through the forest for an extremely long time, I realized something. May has seemingly had an epiphany, and I can't phrase it any other way. By the way, she's like had a light bulb go off in her
Right.
head,
Yeah.
and this is kind of that great reflection of it's like she became a different person when she realized you were alive, right?
Hmm.
She feels that she doesn't have to hold herself to this deal she made with the master, right? That Osha being alive does change everything. And I love that she even says that outright,
Well, of
right?
course. Yeah.
That like, oh no, what she say, my loyalty is to Osha, not your master,
Hmm.
right? And by saying that, rejecting the master as her own, right? It's no longer
Yeah.
our master, it's your
It's yours.
master,
Yeah.
right? And I think this idea that she was reluctant in this, it's hard to kind of square that circle because she murders those Jedi kind of pretty ruthlessly.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it was before she found out that Osha was
That
alive.
Osha was alive. Yeah.
And
Yeah. You're
and
right.
it's like completely changes her perspective on everything.
Hmm.
And combined with this idea that this like bridge too far of the murder of the unarmed person, the
Yeah.
innocent person, is like, oh, I can just reject this whole cloth. I can rely on the Jedi for safety, and because now Chimera starts like, what's the word, like not negotiating, but essentially like having this like trying to barter with her,
Right. Yeah.
right? And what's one of the stages of grief? What's
Bargaining.
the bargaining, right? And he's saying like, well, he'll kill you,
Hmm.
right? And by the way, when he says I'll kill you or he'll kill you, it really feels like he's saying I'll kill you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? He gets really dark there. And she's like, he'll have to find me first, admitting that, he'd need to like make his way through the forest and that it wouldn't be easy without a guide. Of course, again, this kind of gives away that she hasn't put the pieces together yet. She says, I'll have to admit, I did need you. And that, which is a kind of a fun, like, you'll have a lot more resonance later when
Right.
she
Yeah.
realizes that, oh, yeah, you taught me everything that I know. And leaves him strung up, which is really a death sentence on this planet, I think. To be
Right.
honest.
Yeah. I mean, but he,
Um,
probably has a lightsaber, so
Yeah, but she doesn't know that.
I know.
The Jedi running to the sound can't seem to find anything. They're still like lost. But Saul seems to sense something. This is kind of the second time he's kind of like, what's going on? The sense I get is that he's sensing the dark side, like a presence that he hasn't really felt before,
Right.
or at least
Yeah.
not in a long time. Osha wonders why Saul thinks she's ready now to face her sister. Which feels like a weird time to bring this up, to be
Yeah,
honest.
right.
But the episode is almost running out, so whatever. She says she can sense things again, and that it gives her courage to face her. I love this moment. She genuinely feels like she's kind of after that conversation with Jecki, after having felt that creature again, she's kind of she feels that she has a little bit more confidence, right?
Yeah.
I feel like it's so sad that that confidence is so quickly undercut by when she's just tossed aside.
And so
right?
easily. Yeah.
And so easily, and didn't know, and she didn't recognize. She's like, "Is something behind? Oh, he's right behind me."
Yeah.
Right? Like she didn't even know that. She wasn't able to sense that. So I think it's going to completely derail her sense of progress.
Probably. Yeah.
Because I love her like ability to talk with her former master and say, "No. I know that you don't think I'm ready, but I am.
But yeah.
And I feel like I am because here, and here's the reasons."
Mhm.
Right? Meanwhile, Saul says, You're not going to face her, though. You're going to face your past. Both of us will. Once we get safely to the ship, I'll explain everything, I
Yeah.
promise.
Yeah. Like,
Famous
explain
last
everything right
words.
now, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to have this weird random conversation in the middle of like someone screaming for help, then probably you can just go ahead and do it now, but
Yeah.
whatever. May, we get back to May, finds Kelnaka's ship house, but, or domicile as they call it later, but trips and lands on some mushroom things. Not sure if she was supposed to like, if we were like, oh, is she going to get high from this stuff or just like fun to look at? But
She's gonna get
either way, it's
high.
funny. Because yeah, there's what was it I just watched the other day that was like very similar, something like that happened.
Hmm.
Oh, Blue Eyed Samurai.
Oh, okay.
She gets, which is really cool, by the way. People should watch that. But she gets sprayed in the face with like these spores, and then
Ooh, that's
like
cool.
has like a whole trip situation. It's really cool. Um, anyway, she falls in front of Basil. Basil freaks out, warning the Jedi who come running. And then like they're like, oh, just stay behind us. Again, this idea that like we'll protect you, right? I love when Yord says stay behind us. It's ultimately what puts her in the most danger,
Right? Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because they're concentrating on the house. The master comes from behind them and then is able to like confront her first, exploit their weakness. I just think that's really interesting idea. He wants to protect her, but by doing so, it puts her in more danger. May goes inside the house just in time as the Jedi arrive so they don't follow her in. She finds Kelnaka, but he's dead in his chair, a lightsaber gash across his chest. And I'm going to be honest, I was like, oh shit, he's dead. I knew that. I recognized that right away.
Yeah.
But when the camera pans and the slash is like right through his chest and you can like see his guts on the inside and it's still steaming, I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, you're like, whoa.
I was lit like that actually surprised me. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I was not ready for that. Like, it's genuinely shocking.
I know.
I don't know if that, like, what your experience was on that.
No, yeah, same. I was like, holy, that was like pretty graphic, and like, it's obviously just a bummer, but yeah.
It's obviously just a bummer.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's a bummer because if we just rarely get to see Wookiee Jedi, and we would have it would have been nice to see him use his lightsaber. I think we will in flashback anyway.
Yeah, I think so.
It's fine. Anyway, she says he's here, and just at that moment, the sun sets, which is a kind of a cool thematic.
That was very cool.
Right?
Yeah, I like that scene.
And I love the look of like true terror
in her face
that May has on her face, right? Like, oh shit, I underestimated him, and now he's here, and I have to face him. And it's like she's like putting the pieces together, like, oh, I admitted that I wasn't going to do it, and then in the amount of time between me admitting that and getting to this chair, which is maybe 10 minutes tops, the master was able to kill the Wookiee before me, and like walk me into this trap. And it's like, that would be terrifying. I buy that. Anyway, the Jedi call for whoever's inside the domicile to come out, very cop-like, right? Like, in the name of the Republic, come outside with your hands where we can see them, right? I just like when the Jedi aren't that cop-like.
Yeah, I know.
I prefer them more like knights and less like less like cops.
I would agree with you on that.
But again, that's kind of what they want us to. They want us to see that here. May like looks out the window and like wonders what to do. She's kind of really between a rock and a hard place here. Sol once again senses something, turning around to see a dark figure float down behind Osha.
So cool.
What was your reaction here?
Yeah, it was very cool. I was like, oh, I was like, that's different. Like, it was
again so horror-y. There is the reference in the Screen Crush recap. Sorry, not a recap. It's not crappy. It's good. Is that it feels like a direct homage to Alien, and I think that's fun that you mentioned that earlier too. Because the way that the xenomorph comes down in the first Alien right behind them, like slowly, is and out of focus, is similar to the same idea. And then you get the teeth on this thing, and maybe that's kind of on purpose. Either way, the use of this very classic horror filmmaking choice is so cool here. I love the strings. Again, the use of strings is very horror coded in filmmaking, and it's very effective here. It's not necessarily a jump scare, but if you're not expecting that, it can be.
Oh yeah,
and I think that's really cool. How many how often do we get jump scares
Very rarely.
in Star Wars? Almost never.
Yeah,
I
pretty
would say
much
maybe
never.
never. um, so really bold choice. I love that they went that way. This is another example where I almost want Star Wars to be more bold more often. Lean into the filmmaking choices that communicate story not through dialogue but
Mhm.
through action. And this communicates the horror of this type of thing, because
Yeah,
that's what they
yeah.
call it. What is that?
What is that?
Right?
Yeah.
They say um, is is so powerful as a storytelling tool
Mhm.
that they undercut themselves all the time. And I just think this is so really, really effective and
I've
perfectly
always
executed.
said we need more horror in Star Wars, like more
100%.
scary stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like with the spider episode in The Mandalorian. I
Exactly.
fucking hate that episode. Anyway, but for good reasons. Um, anyway, they all turn around. They see it. What is that? Identify yourself, they say. I love the what is that?
Mhm.
Because it's like,
Well, I think they're
how else would you describe
assuming
it?
they're like,
Right?
because they're in the creepy woods and stuff. So I think they're assuming it's like a thing, right?
A
Like, yeah,
creature,
yeah,
right? Maybe. And like it is he does float down, right? That
yeah.
is like I'm not yeah, okay. So again, this is like maybe the most powerful force user we've ever seen on screen, maybe Yoda being the exception to that, because the force push
Is
that
wild.
is wild. He pushes all of them. How many of them are there? 6?
6, I think. Yeah,
7
yeah.
Jedi there. They all get flown back. We've never seen a Jedi float before. That's
No,
a new power. And yeah, it's just so cool. It's so badass, right? They warn it's like May is watching through the door and is like basically paralyzed by fear, right? Um, they try to warn him to stand down, but it approaches Osha. She turns around, looks him right in the face, and this
hmm
again reminds you of that kind of moment where he gets that close when Kaima gets
yeah,
that
yeah.
close
It's like, oh,
in
you
episode
just look, yeah,
2, right?
exactly.
And then lights his red like the lightsaber out of frame in a way that like makes it feel like very much like a threat against Osha's life,
Yeah,
you know? Um and like not a very a very thinly veiled threat. Um and then all the Jedi, jump into action. We get to see them spark all their lightsabers, really cool. Um Saul tells her to run, but we simply get this little flick of the wrist
wild.
from
It's like
the
a two
master and
finger flick.
right, and she just goes it's almost funny
Yeah.
how far she goes flying, like, woo! It reminds me of, um, what is that movie? The oh, man, it's gonna come to me, like, "What is your favorite color?"
Oh, Monty
"Blue." "No, green."
Python.
"Ah!" Monty Python and the
Yeah,
Holy
and
Grail,
Holy
thank
Grail.
you.
Yeah,
It's yeah, when they send them flying into that
yeah. It's a
that pit
chasm.
or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, the chasm. Um What is the average airspeed velocity of a sparrow? Um, African or European? Ah, love it. Literally, a perfect
It
movie.
it
The
is.
Holy
It
Grail.
very
It's
much
so
is.
funny. Right. Throw the holy hand grenade. Anyway, um, so that's what it reminds me of. If you could totally change the music and it would be very funny to like watch her go
Oh,
flying,
yeah.
but it's scary in this moment. And another example of how powerful this force wielder is: the Jedi jump into action and then get absolutely demolished by this crazy force push
Yeah.
of throwing all the Jedi back, and then we cut directly to credits. And as I
Mhm.
said before,
Don't love
I
the
think it's
cliffhanger.
bullshit that they cut it here. I just think it's bullshit. I
I
think
know. That's
let
fine.
this fight play out, and then you can leave the aftermath to next week.
Yeah.
But if we cut back and we're in the middle of a fight, I think that's not that. I don't know. I don't like that. I want to be in the moment. I have to now bring myself back into the moment to be in this fight, and I feel
Yeah.
like that's a harder
Well,
task
I'm
than paying it off now.
curious if we're even going to see one. Like, I don't know. Maybe they're too fucked up from that, and he's just going to take her and
Oh,
go.
it's possible.
Like, where
It's
he's
possible.
just like, that's
You think
not.
he's gonna?
Well, I just feel like that's not what
Who's he gonna take?
May.
Okay, he's gonna take May.
Like, that's like not what he's there for.
Does he take May and Osha?
Maybe, but
Ooh, that
but
would
we'll
be
see.
cool.
I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. Because this is the episode. I mean,
Yeah.
we said everything we need to say.
Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts?
No, not really. I mean, I'm pumped to see this character more and like to see how strong they are, because from just that moment is like, whoa, okay, like this is pretty wild. So I'm pumped to see like a dark side user that's actually like crazy strong like that in this series.
Yeah, me too. I mean, at this point, I again don't know really where we go from here.
Well, yeah.
Right? Yeah. You know, it's funny. It's the end of the episode. I'm realizing that the live stream had no audio the entire time. So that is
There you go. That's
real
what you
fun.
messed up
That is
today.
real fun. I see, but I just reset this last time before we recorded, so I don't know what's different. Anyway, apologize to this. Is basically, I'll just have to delete this live stream. It's basically completely useless.
Yeah.
They're just watching us flap my lips for 2 hours and nothing coming out. Anyway, apologies. We'll have that. Make sure to check that next week. If you're coming into the live stream, we do record this live Wednesday evenings around 8 p.m. Central. So just keep that in mind. Subscribe to YouTube and Twitch, and you'll get notified when we go live. It's always fun to join the chat room. I was wondering why we had no chats. I really wish someone had said that we had no audio. That would have been really helpful. If that's ever happening, just let me know. I can change. I can fix it. I can change. So anyway, thank you everyone for listening this long in. This is a long episode, but it was a dense one. So we needed to unpack it. And we'll be back next week with episode 5, which I presume will be called Night. Perhaps, I don't know, day, night, dawn. I don't know. Maybe it's D words now. We'll go back. Maybe we'll go back to the duel thing.
Yeah.
There's no rules in the title for these episode. Anyway, I actually didn't read the log line. Racing to the next target, the Jedi head to a new world as they close in on the clever assassin.
For this episode, yes.
I just needed to. Yeah, I needed to read it because it's law. I have to read it at least once in a recording. So. Anyways, on that note, thank you everyone for listening. And as I said, we'll be back next week. Until then, may the Force be with you.